Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. After meeting in high school, Lloyd and Michelle got married in 1991, not long after they graduated. After getting married and attending college, they soon began a family. Prior to landing a job as an engineer in a factory, Lloyd Neurotter served as a professor of exact sciences at a college. After earning his engineering degree in the mid-1990s, Michelle was a professor of English and also held a college degree. Their first daughter was born at about the same time. Two more daughters were later born to Michelle. In the 1990s, as their lives were changing significantly, they moved to a large house in the charming town of Corning, New York. The two seemed happy. In addition to working hard, Lloyd spent a lot of time with his family, particularly his three daughters. Michelle was cheerful and energetic, keeping occupied with housework and the children. She homeschooled the kids in addition to being a teacher. Many of their friends looked up to them as an example of the perfect family. But Lloyd's actions changed significantly over time. He changed from being a devoted husband and father to a despot who aimed to rule the whole household. He insisted on complete obedience and following the guidelines he established. In order to get his wife and kids to comply with his wishes, Lloyd was willing to use force if needed. Relationships within the family consequently quickly deteriorated. The only daughter with whom Lloyd had a positive relationship was Carrie, the middle daughter. She was different from her sisters in that she was devoted to her father. By taking her to events like the ballet, doing her hair and makeup, and giving her extra attention, Lloyd showed her how much he valued her loyalty. He brutally imposed order and control over the rest of the family, though, and showed them no such kindness. Carrie was compassionate and kind as a child. She was involved in many humanitarian endeavors and especially loved working with the homeless. Up until 2008, when America went through a serious financial crisis, the family was able to get along. Millions of Americans experienced financial and employment difficulties during this period. After losing his job, Lloyd started looking for another one right away, but his efforts proved fruitless. Michelle began looking for work as well, but she found it difficult to juggle her search with taking care of their daughters and the house. Lloyd eventually secured a reputable position in New Jersey. The fact that her husband had at last found work pleased Michelle. She continued to take care of the kids while finding part-time employment in Corning, her hometown. Michelle found it more and more challenging to run the family alone after Lloyd moved to New Jersey on his own. When Lloyd demanded a divorce a few months later, things took an odd turn. The decision was unexpected because there were no urgent grounds for separation. No serious arguments between the couple were known to friends or acquaintances. Michelle found herself in a challenging situation after Lloyd's decision caught her and the kids completely off guard. She had been a great wife and mother, but she was in a difficult situation because of her husband's behavior. According to Lloyd, he no longer wanted to get back together with Michelle because they had become estranged during their separation. After landing a job teaching English at a college, Michelle started raising her kids by herself. The divorce lasted for a number of years. After she and her kids relocated to a new residence in the same city, Michelle's life became a little simpler. By that time, her daughters were old enough to help out around the house, giving Michelle more time to concentrate on her work. She was establishing herself professionally and earning a good living. She still had to deal with Lloyd, though, who wanted sole custody of their kids. Additionally, the two were embroiled in a savage argument about child support. Lloyd repeatedly tried to defame Michelle in court to obtain full custody during the protracted divorce process, which lasted more than 5 years. Michelle retaliated in spite of the challenges, defending herself and filing counterclaims against her ex-husband. Their family's ongoing legal troubles started to come up in court and among their friends. Master manipulator Lloyd was. In the years after 2010, the middle child, Carrie, moved in with her father. She loved and missed her father very much, so she thought it was her decision. The judge, however, disagreed with Carrie's decision and supported the other children's decision to remain with their mother throughout the trial. To pick up the youngest daughter for swim practice, a family friend drove to Michelle's house on August 28, 2017. He caught a glimpse of Michelle through the living room window, but she was standing strangely close to the stairs. He exited the vehicle and walked toward the house, but when he knocked on the door, nobody answered. The dog was barking non-stop, and Michelle was standing where she was. He went in and stepped closer, as if the door were open. He was horrified to see that Michelle was hanging from the railing rather than standing. Her hand was cold and stiff when he felt for a pulse. He reported that it looked like Michelle had killed herself, and promptly dialed 911. Emergency workers confirmed that Michelle, 46, could not be saved when they arrived. She was dead already. When police searched the house, they discovered that Michelle and her 14-year-old daughter were the only occupants. The oldest daughter, Carrie, had gone off to college and was living with her father. Initially, it appeared that Michelle had committed suicide, but as police looked into it more, they found a number of irregularities. It appears that the scene was staged because Michelle had facial marks that were incompatible with suicide, and there was no sign of the youngest daughter, who was supposed to be at home. In addition to considering the possibility of kidnapping, police started looking into the possibility of murder. Michelle's husband and daughters were contacted by detectives. It turned out that Carrie, who was the first to reply, was accompanied by her younger sister. Since the younger sister had not missed her swim lesson and had no justification for being with her father and sister, the police thought this was suspicious. When asked, Carrie disclosed that she had gone to spend the night with her mother. She said that because Lloyd was attempting to take away her youngest daughter and the court appeared to be siding with him, Michelle had been upset and crying all night. Carrie claimed that just before the family friend found Michelle's body, she and her sister left their mother's house. She clarified that she was afraid to leave her with Michelle, who had been acting strangely and inappropriately all day, so she brought her younger sister along. But this account didn't seem likely. Michelle's friends and acquaintances gave the police a different account. 2 days prior to her passing, Michelle had gone back to court for a custody hearing concerning her youngest daughter, according to one friend. Despite being involved in a contentious custody dispute, Lloyd did not show up for the final hearing. It was very unusual for him to not even answer or call his cell phone. Lloyd's absence shocked everyone involved in the process. However, Michelle felt that the custody dispute had been settled in her favor, and she was truly happy. She was so sure that she would now have full custody of her daughter that she even celebrated with her lawyer. Her mother suspected Lloyd of being involved in Michelle's death and promptly reported it to the police. Michelle's decision to commit suicide and leave her children in the care of strangers was unthinkable to her. Given the contentious nature of their divorce and Lloyd's lengthy history of trying to deny Michelle parental rights, he was made the main suspect. At first, it was hard to get in touch with Lloyd. He helped Carrie settle in before she started college, and she said he was with her when the murder occurred. In addition, Lloyd was lodging at a hotel in Rochester, which is roughly 160 kilometers away from Corning. After that, he made the roughly 4,000-kilometer journey to California for a job interview. Lloyd didn't seem very upset when investigators finally got to him and told him about Michelle's passing. He just took a plane to Corning and went directly to the courthouse to stop paying alimony, which seemed very suspicious in the situation. He confirmed Carrie's claims at the police station after the hearing, saying he had been assisting her with her move and was in a different city when Michelle died. Lloyd never followed through on his promise to take a polygraph test. Detectives did not have enough evidence to charge Lloyd despite his evasive behavior, but as their suspicions grew, they started looking into his whereabouts. Through the examination of CCTV footage and cell phone records, they found inconsistencies in Lloyd's alibi. He seemed to have occasionally forgotten his cell phone, perhaps to conceal his whereabouts. According to the video, the younger sister was with Lloyd and Carrie when they left the Rochester hotel the night of the murder, and did not return until the following morning. This ran counter to Lloyd's assertions. A closer look showed that Lloyd was in serious financial trouble. He was in dire need of money and owed more than $100,000 on his credit cards. He had purchased a more than $200,000 life insurance policy on Michelle, which would pay out to him after she passed away. Investigators' suspicions were raised by this discovery, and they started actively looking for Lloyd as a suspect. Investigating further, investigators discovered that Carrie continued to show up at crucial points in the case. They made the decision to listen in on Lloyd and Carrie's phone conversations, which showed that they were concealing something. Carrie was frequently rudely interrupted by Lloyd, who seemed to sense that they were being watched. He stressed during these calls that they should not discuss certain topics over the phone, and suggested that they speak face-to-face instead. The police believed they were headed in the right direction. The medical examiner's report added credence to the murder theory. Michelle had been attacked from behind and strangled, as evidenced by the marks on her chin and the bruises around her eyes. It was almost impossible for her to resist the killer's use of a rope to squeeze her throat. To make the scene appear to be a suicide, it had been sloppily staged. Armed with this evidence, investigators once again focused on Carrie. Detectives confronted her after her college classes, despite her repeated refusals to come to the police station for interrogation. Carrie initially denied any involvement, but after being coerced, she acknowledged that she and Lloyd had spent the morning of the murder at her mother's house. She said that after an argument between her parents, Lloyd and Michelle went upstairs, after which Michelle fell silent. But when the investigators dug deeper, Carrie told a far more sinister tale. While making sure her younger sister didn't see the crime, Carrie admitted that Lloyd had killed Michelle. She had actually been involved in the murder. She clarified that Lloyd had been outlining how to set up the scene to appear as though it was a suicide, a week prior to the incident. Although she was unable to provide a clear explanation, Carrie's startling admission made it clear that she had publicly detested her mother. She acknowledged that her feelings had been impacted by her father's continual disparaging remarks about Michelle. Because of Lloyd's manipulation, Carrie had turned against her mother and was prepared to help him commit the crime. Police moved to arrest Lloyd, and Carrie was taken into custody as an accomplice, but there was no sign of him. When police finally caught up with him in Princeton, he threatened to jump from a fifth-story parking garage railing. Officers were able to subdue and arrest Lloyd Neureuther, who was 45 at the time, after 2 hours of negotiating. Carrie and Lloyd were both charged with Michelle's murder. Lloyd was charged with tampering with evidence, conspiracy to commit murder, and first-degree murder. He strongly refuted the accusations, saying he was at a hotel when the murder took place. On the night of the murder, however, security footage showed him leaving the hotel with Carrie and coming back the following morning with her younger sister. Furthermore, GPS data indicated that Lloyd was close to Michelle's residence at the time of the crime, and his DNA was discovered on her pajamas. Carrie was accused of conspiracy to commit murder, concealing evidence, and second-degree murder. She entered a guilty plea and consented to cooperate with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence, as she faced the prospect of a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. It was anticipated that she would testify against her father. The prosecution emphasized the case's unsettling aspects throughout the trial. Carrie had helped her father plan and carry out the murder, so she had been a willing participant in the crime. Despite having numerous chances to prevent the crime, she assisted Lloyd in killing her mother. There was proof that Carrie and Lloyd had gone to Michelle's house early in the morning. Unaware of their intentions, Michelle opened the door out of trust. Carrie made sure her younger sister didn't wake up and find out what was going on, while Lloyd attacked her from behind and strangled her with a rope. The younger sister was not aware of the tragedy, because they woke her up after the murder and fled through the back door. More than 26 folders of evidence were presented by the prosecution, showing how Lloyd had tricked Carrie into detesting her mother. He had disparaged Michelle on numerous occasions over the years, severing Carrie's connection with her mother and presenting her in a negative light. Carrie's hatred and willingness to commit the crime were fostered by Lloyd's persuasion that Michelle posed a threat to her and her siblings. The prosecution claims that Lloyd's desire to avoid sharing custody of his youngest daughter and financial gain were the driving forces behind the murder. Lloyd and Carrie thought they could claim Michelle's death as a suicide and use the money from the life insurance policy to live comfortably. Carrie testified that because of his crippling debt, which included $6,000 in monthly child support payments, her father had threatened to kill him or commit suicide unless they killed Michelle. Carrie tragically decided to help her father because she was influenced by him. In the end, Lloyd entered a guilty plea to charges of murder and forcing his daughter to assist him. He tried to defend his actions, though, by saying that he killed Michelle to keep the kids safe from her, but no one took him seriously. The court acknowledged that Carrie had suffered from her father's moral abuse and manipulation. Lloyd was given a life sentence without the possibility of release after being found guilty of first-degree murder and other offenses. Supported by her maternal grandmother, Carrie received a prison sentence ranging from 1 to 3 years for her role in concealing evidence. On January 16, 2020, she was released early after completing a portion of her sentence. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, Let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. This was only the start of a call in which Derek Rosa, a 13-year-old son, would divulge information so startling and unthinkable that even the experienced dispatcher would find it hard to believe what she was hearing. Officers arrived at the horrific scene within minutes. Unaware that they were going to come across one of the most unsettling cases they had ever come across, the police carried on with their investigation. Derek shockingly called 911 on October 12, 2023, to report that his mother, Irina Garcia, was hurt at their apartment in Hialeah, Florida. The most horrifying crime they could have ever envisioned began with that unsettling 911 call. Derek appeared to be experiencing intense grief during the call, as he told the authorities that his mother, Irina Garcia, had been confirmed dead. A 13-year-old son reporting the news to the dispatcher would have been a heartbreaking moment, but everyone was about to be shocked by the horrible secrets concealed behind this call. "I shared some pictures with my friends," he told the dispatcher. What images would he have been able to show his friends? Derek quickly gave the answer when he disclosed yet another startling fact that caught everyone off guard. It was shocking to hear Derek tell the dispatcher that he killed his mother. Derek's motivations are still unknown, but he was going to divulge information that would only make matters worse. The apartment was occupied by 3 people. Given that Derek and the newborn baby were in the apartment, the dispatcher recognized the urgency of the situation right away. To protect the infant, the police had to move quickly. To find out what had happened, detectives raced to the crime scene. Everyone in the area was shocked when the police arrived and took Derek into custody. Derek was standing with bloody hands and no remorse at all. Without any delay, the detectives got to work on their investigation. They found Irina lying on the bed with her newborn baby covered in blood, and they also found a pool of blood on the floor of her room. Derek had committed the heinous crime of stabbing his mother more than 40 times. After attempting to collect all of the evidence discovered in room 201, the authorities were taken aback when they came across a crucial piece of evidence that left the entire team in shock. Just before Derek dialed 911 on the evening of October 12, 2023, they first discovered the doorbell camera footage. When Irina was last seen, she was nursing her newborn child, according to the footage from the doorbell camera. A moment later, Derek showed up and hurried off. Derek asked why Irina always told him to run slowly after she told him, in Spanish, not to run too fast. Then he walked out of the apartment and then came back in. What might have caused that horrific crime? Derek might have been annoyed by his mother's worry, but the question was still unanswered. In addition to remembering Derek's 911 call exchange with the dispatcher, the detectives needed to figure out how he was carrying a weapon. Furthermore, just as he was about to reveal yet another unexpected development, the dispatcher asked if he had any weapons at home. He soon disclosed a startling reality. He acknowledged that after killing his mother, he intended to use the gun he had to end his own life. The fact that Derek had attempted self-harm shocked the detectives. It exposed his unstable mental state at the time of the murder. They were uncertain, though, whether it was the product of mental illness or a deliberate act. The video of Irina's murder was the first important piece of evidence the detectives were about to see, and they were shocked to find it. The video clearly showed Irina lying on the bed with her newborn baby gently comforting her. However, in a subsequent clip, Derek was seen standing over Irina with his hand in motion, suggesting that he'd attacked her while she was asleep. The knife that Derek claimed he used to attack his mother was also discovered by the authorities. Luckily, he didn't hurt his sister, but these pictures were sufficient proof that Derek killed his mother. In addition, he admitted that after killing his mother, he had sent 2 pictures to his online friend, one of himself and the other of his mother, who had passed away. His hand was obviously covered in blood in the picture he sent to his friend, which amply demonstrated the gravity of the situation. The revelation of a 13-year-old son who not only murdered his mother, but also dared to show pictures of the crime to someone was startling. Once the detectives gathered sufficient evidence, they became certain that something was wrong with Derek. The investigators recognized the importance of comprehending the family's history, as it could reveal information about Derek too. Without any delay, the investigators began their investigation to ascertain the precise cause of his behavior. They focused on investigating Derek's background and his family. Derek Rosa, a former model student, consistently made the honor roll and excelled academically. According to the teachers, they described him as a good boy and an intelligent one. He was very close to his mother, Irina Garcia. In the family, the one who received the most caring attention from Irina was Derek. For his emotional life, the relationship was therefore important. But when Irina became pregnant with a girl in early 2023, everything changed. The newborn's arrival somewhat altered the dynamics of the household. Derek was left feeling defeated on the sidelines as Irina instantly turned her focus to the baby. Derek was more emotionally affected by the shifts in family dynamics, which made him more shy and envious of his younger sister. According to some people involved in the case, Derek might have felt abandoned and believed that the new baby was receiving the same amount of love that his mother used to give him. Adding to the emotional strain mentioned earlier, Derek's father, Frank Ramos, was a truck driver who was often away from home due to his rigorous delivery routes. Irina had to take care of all the housework and childcare because he only came home a few times a month. Even though there were no overt signs of severe family strife, the investigators later came to the conclusion that Derek might have felt lonely and emotionally deprived as a result of the lack of a father figure and a newborn child. Derek became more and more resentful as the months went by. Over the course of the evening of October 12, 2023, it became violent. The video from the baby monitor that showed Derek standing over his mother while she slept was found by the police. This terrifying incident occurred shortly before Irina passed away. According to the police, Derek acted out of jealousy, displaced aggression, and a desire to win back his mother's affection and control over the family. The investigators felt compelled to question Derek in order to obtain a more thorough understanding. The investigators took extra care when questioning him because he was only 13 years old and might be dealing with psychological problems. Detective Gonzalez started asking Derek straightforward questions so he wouldn't feel threatened. They began by posing straightforward queries to Derek regarding his daily schedule. In order to learn more about Derek's whereabouts and mental state before the incident, the detectives immediately focused on the events of the morning of October 12. As he interacted with the authorities, Derek seemed composed and helpful, demonstrating a solid grasp of his family's dynamics. He talked about spending weekends with his stepfather, Frank Ramos, and the family didn't seem to be having any problems. After that, detectives turned their attention to what had happened that evening. Derek appeared to hesitate before answering this question when detectives asked it. Derek had been giving accurate information up until that point, but the detectives were about to ask a crucial question when he gave them an unexpected response. When the detectives asked him what weapon he used to stab his mother, he gave them an unexpected answer. Derek casually brought up the size of the murder weapon. He seemed to be casually speaking with the authorities, displaying no remorse, and he was not aware of the grave consequences of his crime. The detectives carried on their discussion. He disclosed yet another startling fact. He had stolen the gun from his stepfather's closet and tried but failed to shoot himself. They were hoping to learn more about his friend, with whom he shared the crime photos, and the conversation was going well so far. It was important to mention that he spoke with Sweden, an online friend, virtually every weekend. Additionally, Derek confided in him enough to share pictures of the crime, suggesting that they may have discussed something significant. As a result, the detectives quickly turned their attention to Derek's conversation with his friend. Detective Gonzalez noticed something on Derek's shirt just as he was about to mention the 911 call. He remained unaffected, even though the officers were appalled by the evidence of his crime on his shirt. Rather, he calmly held up his bleeding hand. Derek was clearly emotionally detached as he explained what he had done. The investigators asked the crucial question, and shortly after, the graphic depiction of Derek's crime surfaced, frightening them. It was genuinely terrifying when Derek described the crime in detail, demonstrating each stage of his assault on Irina with hand gestures. Derek was obviously fully conscious when he committed the crime. He was clearly uncomfortable when the detectives questioned him about why he killed his mother, and he quickly came up with a reason to use the restroom. Still, the investigators persisted in asking the same question. Derek asked for a lawyer after becoming uncooperative. Without Derek Rose's confession to explain his actions, the case was still being investigated. Nevertheless, detectives gathered enough evidence, such as CCTV footage, a knife found at the scene, and photos from the crime scene, to create a case. Given that Derek chose the best time and location to carry out the murder, this evidence demonstrated that he was a premeditated killer. Derek was charged with first-degree murder and made his first court appearance on October 15, 2023. He showed no remorse for the charges against him and remained emotionless and icy throughout the hearing. Derek's defense attorney asked for a postponement of the hearing, claiming that they had not yet received the state attorney's notice of intent. They also asked whether psychological factors might have been involved and talked about the part that some mental health conditions may have played. Evidence quickly refuted this, demonstrating that Derek had searched for prohibited items on Google at 6 p.m. on October 12, 2023. At 6 p.m. on October 12, he did conduct Google searches. He entered the following search terms: Is a small knife good for killing? What is the best place to stab someone? And the carotid artery image diagram. This search history revealed evidence of planning, which bolstered the prosecution's claim that the act was planned rather than spontaneous. Derek was moved from the adult jail to a juvenile detention facility at the request of Derek's defense lawyers. They claimed that Derek needed a psychological test that could only be performed in a juvenile facility because of his age. The prosecution, however, disagreed, claiming that Derek's search history demonstrated premeditation and that this offense was extremely serious. But the defense also brought up his mental health problems. He had been diagnosed with ADHD by a psychologist and on the autism spectrum by another specialist. They further supported their case for Derek's placement in a juvenile detention facility by highlighting the fact that he had threatened to hurt himself. It was evident to the psychologists who examined the case that Derek's actions on that fateful night were the result of a well-thought-out plan rather than an impulse. He had planned what he was going to do because he was captured on the baby monitor above Arena. The most concerning evidence of Derek's mental illness also surfaced after the crime, when he shared a selfie and a picture of his mother's lifeless body with a friend. This conduct revealed a lack of any fundamental humanity, which is a trait frequently lacking in psychopathic people. Throughout the trial, Derek's family steadfastly supported him in spite of the overwhelming evidence against him. One particularly poignant instance was when Derek's grandmother, representing his family's steadfast support, waved at him and blew him a kiss from the courtroom. At this point, more than 50 people were shouting Derek-supporting slogans while holding banners outside the court. On November 7, 2023, the organizers presented him as an innocent teen and a former honor student. Regardless of the offense, Derek's supporters argued for his opportunity to change. A hearing regarding the admissibility of evidence was held on December 15, 2023. Citing the premeditated nature of the crime, the judge decided, after considering the facts, that Derek would continue to be held in adult custody. His supporters criticized this decision, claiming it disregarded his age and mental health conditions. Derek's defense team keeps arguing for a lighter sentence as the case progresses, claiming that life in prison without the possibility of release would be unfair to a child of his age. The trial has come to represent the complexity of juvenile justice, bringing up tough issues for society to consider. Do serious crimes committed by minors deserve life in prison, or should they be given an opportunity to change? The court will further evaluate Derek's mental health and determine his ultimate sentence at the next hearing, which may be set for December 2024. Derek is currently being held in adult custody under 24-hour supervision while his family and the general public await the outcome. Traditional ideas of guilt, innocence, and rehabilitation in the legal system have been called into question by the case, which has had a long-lasting effect. What elements, in your opinion, might have contributed to Derek's choice to carry out this crime? His actions could have been motivated by a number of things, including jealousy, specific psychological issues, or the possible influence of his online friend. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. You just heard a 16-year-old boy make a last-ditch plea for his family's survival. Subsequent attempts to contact him were unsuccessful shortly after the call ended. The Kitsap rescue team later discovered a terrifying and unsettling scene. 3 burned bodies, 2 boys and a woman, were discovered inside the burning house. The father, John Derek Carriga, was absent from the scene though. It was highly suspicious because the father was not present, suggesting that he may have been involved in planning this gory scene. The quiet surroundings of Kitsap County were the scene of this terrifying incident, which left the community in shock and in search of answers. John Derek Carriaga, 43, Crystal Lynn Carriaga, 37, and their 2 teenagers, Hunter Evan Shape, 16, and Jonathan Felipe Higgins, 16, made up the Carriaga family. They shared a home in Washington's Kitsap County, with the 2 teenagers from prior relationships. John and Crystal married in 2009, combining their families. But their joy was short-lived, and as their 8 years as a family were coming to an end, an unexpected guest turned everything upside down. Kitsap County, Washington, saw another ordinary Friday on January 27, 2017. The Carriga family gathered in their quaint 1-story ranch home on West Tenino Drive as evening approached. According to reports, Chris Cale had some friends at the house. While at the house, Johnny got a call and left to meet someone, informing the family that he would be back soon. Later, Johnny was back on the property, but he didn't go inside the house. They snacked and indulged in late-night activities like watching TV or browsing through their phones, just like any other family. On that fateful Friday night, however, 16-year-old Hunter Shape made a terrifying 911 call to Kitsap County dispatchers, shattering the peace of the evening. He begged authorities to come to their aid immediately. When the rescue crew finally reached the Carriga home, they were met with a somber scene. All members of the family, including Hunter Shape, had been shot and killed inside their house, which was later burned down. The community was shocked to learn of the tragedy that had occurred when they woke up on Sunday morning, January 29, 2017, to the terrifying headline, "3 people found dead in Kitsap County home after fire." The headline in the newspapers was incorrect. "Homeowner missing." This made the already unsettling situation even more concerning and uncertain. Initial reports stated that the victims, a woman and 2 teenagers, had been found inside a burning house. The community was left reeling from the shock of such a violent and senseless crime after authorities confirmed that the deaths were classified as homicides. John Carriga, the homeowner, was nowhere to be found, and it was confirmed that the crime had occurred the Friday before. Authorities asked people to be on the lookout for Carriga and his truck, a brown 2005 Ford F-150, and to report any sightings. Although John was listed as missing, rumors started to circulate that he might have been complicit in the horrible crime. Public opinion was greatly influenced by the press, with headlines stoking conjecture and doubt. The reference to "someone here with a gun" only served to heighten anxiety about Carriga, but it quickly became clear that the media had erred greatly in reporting that 16-year-old Hunter Shape, who had made the upsetting 911 call before tragically passing away from his injuries, was still alive. Some startling information surfaced as investigators worked on the case, highlighting the heinousness of the crime. More than $50,000 in cash was found concealed in a strong box in the main bedroom, along with an additional $7,000 in a money bag, and shell casings, mostly 9mm, were found on the back deck. In a desperate attempt to find clues, law enforcement used every resource at their disposal to find Johnny Carriga and his truck over the course of the following few days. The ongoing investigation was eventually shaken by a significant development: the finding of John Carriga's truck. On a secluded road in North Mason County, the burned wreckage with Johnny's lifeless body inside was discovered. Authorities acted quickly after a bystander walking through the area made the discovery. The local community was asked for help by the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office, which encouraged anyone with information to come forward. The area was thoroughly examined by crime scene investigators in an effort to find any hints that could provide insight into John's death. One of the most important pieces of evidence they discovered was a single latex glove that was discovered close to the burned-out truck. Authorities appealed to residents and businesses with security cameras for any footage that might offer important insights into the case. After this discovery sparked speculation and raised questions. Lieutenant Earl Smith, the sheriff's detective, stressed the value of video evidence and urged anyone with pertinent footage to assist law enforcement. The community responded quickly to the appeal, with people coming forward to offer support in any manner they could. Although there was a collaborative spirit throughout the investigation, the specifics of John's death circumstances were still unknown. Detectives reported that there were indications of forced entry and visible damage to the gate on the road leading to the tree farm. There was a clear sign of some struggle amid the confusion and uncertainty, as if Johnny's truck had crashed through the gate. Many people were troubled by the memory of Hunter's shop. In her somber announcement, North Kitsap High School principal Megan Swayze honored Hunter's memory and urged everyone who knew him to treasure their time together. When Detective Elizabeth Lisa Gundrum was assigned to the case, a glimmer of hope appeared as the community grieved the loss of the Carrigaw family. Due to a severe lack of eyewitnesses and conclusive evidence, investigators began looking into the victims' personal lives. They discovered a number of perplexing but plausible motivations in the process. In essence, these were conjectures regarding the family's financial transactions and business endeavors, which fueled theories of potential illegal activity and criminal ties. The unsettling 911 call made by one of the victims was the first thing that caught investigators' attention. What prevented Hunter from bringing up the fire, or was he perplexed? This complicated an already perplexing investigation by raising questions about the timing and motivations behind the arson. Authorities had a lot of questions and uncertainties as the investigation went on. The circumstances surrounding John Carrigaw's kidnapping, the identity of the person or people involved, and the motivation behind the attack were all still unknown. Months went by with little improvement, but in February 2017, a breakthrough came when surveillance footage showed John Carrigaw purchasing cigarettes at a nearby grocery store. He appeared to be acting normally in the hours before his disappearance. Although this shed some light on his whereabouts, it produced no noteworthy leads. Then, a picture of a person of interest that was taken from surveillance footage at a Target store just days prior to the killings was made public by authorities in June 2017. Suspicions regarding their possible involvement in the crime were raised by the image, which showed a person entering the store. This demonstrated the urgency of the investigation and was the first official communication in months. Sheriff Gary Simpson confirmed that multiple people were involved in the painstakingly planned killings and underlined the need for public assistance. This made the case more complicated and led to clues regarding the suspects' intentions and relationships to the victims. Questions concerning their potential purchases and connection to the crime were raised by the request for information on the unidentified suspect who was spotted at Target 12 days prior to the killings. Could materials discovered at the crime scene or firearms purchased at the store be connected to the killings? The investigation advanced in September 2017 when Danny Kelly Jr. was identified as a person of interest. Danny had been Johnny's best man at his wedding and had been a longtime friend. According to reports, Danny and his estranged mother had a troubling encounter during which she accused him of misbehavior. According to the case report, he was arrested after repeatedly groping and approaching his mother. Authorities explained that he had not been formally charged in relation to the killings, despite his suspected involvement in the Carrigaw case, which caused some concern. The murders of the Carrigaw family were the year's most important local news story, as 2017 came to an end. An anonymous donor who gave $16,000 to Crime Stoppers, boosting the reward fund to $20,000, further stoked the community's long-standing sentiments. Investigators were determined to follow leads in the case even after Danny J. Kelly Jr.'s assault charges against his mother were dropped. Authorities published a longer version of Hunter Shop's terrifying 911 call on January 11, 2018. As they worked, investigators discovered that Danny was dressed in Bandito's motorcycle club gear in the video. Members of the motorcycle club were urged to provide information by investigators. This was an important step because investigators made Danny Kelly Jr.'s affiliation with the Bandito's motorcycle club public and named him as a person of interest. For those who don't know, law enforcement and intelligence organizations in several nations have identified the Bandito's motorcycle club as a motorcycle gang. Despite the club's denials of being a criminal organization, a number of its members have been found guilty of committing crimes. Over the years, the club has been the focus of numerous law enforcement operations and has a significant presence in Washington state. The Department of Justice claims that Bandidos members have been actively involved in violent crimes and methamphetamine trafficking in Washington. Surveillance footage that showed Johnny Carraga meeting someone at a nearby grocery store just before the killings drew more attention. Authorities reiterated their conviction that Bandidos Motorcycle Club members were directly responsible for the Carraga family killings in January 2020. The biker community was urged to provide any information that could help with the investigation. Since then, though, the case had made little to no headway and had stalled for almost 5 years. After more investigation, it was discovered that Johnny had a lengthy history of transporting and distributing drugs. During his frequent visits to California, he allegedly obtained kilograms of cocaine to distribute in Kitsap County. One of Johnny's close friends, Danny, started selling drugs directly to Robert James Watson, the head of the local Bandidos chapter, as a result of his involvement with the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. Indeed, despite their close relationship, the first suspects, Danny J. Kelly Jr., had a falling out with Johnny prior to the murders, allegedly over money that Danny had stolen. Other Bandidos Motorcycle Club members who were considering joining the club were contacted by Johnny as he grew his distribution network in Kitsap County. The locations of Carraga and the suspects prior to, during, and following the murders were displayed by detectives using cell phone tracking. In the 10 days preceding the murders, Danny Kelly Jr. made extensive use of a prepaid mobile burner phone that he had purchased at the Silverdale Target to communicate with John Carraga. Despite the fact that the phone didn't expire until April 2017, communication ceased thereafter. When members of the Bandidos were suspected of being involved in the killings, detectives in January 2020 obtained a search warrant for Robert Watson's cell phone. One of the recovered texts between Duneen and Robert Watson, dated January 23, 2020, included a comment from Duneen about the weather. "A little humid today." The Carraga family had guests over the night of the killings, but Johnny left right away after getting a call. He briefly parked next to another car in a nearby grocery store parking lot before leaving, according to surveillance footage. The friends left the Carraga residence in the meantime. 3 men showed up and started shooting before Johnny could get back. According to reports, Johnny's wife Christielle was shot in the driveway first, then her son Jonathan Higgins, and finally Johnny's son Hunter Shape. Jonathan Higgins was shot after he came out of his room to see how the disturbance was going, and Christelle was shot in the head. At least one shooter ambushed Hunter Shape as he was bringing a pizza inside the house. The evidence suggested that he caught the murderer off guard. He was hit by 2 more shots after the first one missed. Sheep was still alive when he called 911, but he was presumed dead. The call ended abruptly, indicating that the shooter may have damaged or tampered with the phone before shooting Hunter to death. The attackers then used accelerants and fire starter logs to start fires at various points throughout the house, and they threw rocks through the windows to feed the flames. The suspects later displayed questionable conduct, and this evidence connected them to the crime. A witness saw Danny driving Johnny's truck away from the scene of the crime. Days prior to the killings, Danny reportedly bought a prepaid phone from a nearby Target, which he used to speak with Johnny frequently, a common tactic in criminal activity, according to surveillance footage. Only during the 12 days before Johnny's murder was that burner phone used for communication. Interestingly, the phone stopped working just before the murders. Watson claimed to have gotten into a fight with a homeless black man while at a club member's house without his pants. Later that night, Watson called 911 to report that a loaded Glock handgun and another loaded magazine had been stolen from his truck, which had been broken into a few days prior. Watson was fired from Kitsap County Public Works after he stopped showing up for work. Detectives discovered in September 2017 that approximately $303,000 had been deposited into his accounts that year, including multiple cash deposits that were untraceable. According to reports, Johnny Carraga concealed $200,000 beneath his house, but it was never discovered. On the night of the murder, a neighbor also saw Carraga's truck speeding down Tonino Drive and heard gunshots. The driver was recognized by the neighbor as Donnie, whom he had known when Donnie's family shared a home. Nearly bumper to bumper, a silver car followed the truck. Because Dani and John Carnegie disliked each other so much, detectives found it suspicious that Dani would be at Carnegie's house or drive his truck. Robert's brother Johnny Watson's 2006 Mercedes was discovered stripped and abandoned in the Puyallup River less than a week after investigators made public footage of Carraga's truck and the unidentified vehicle at the Camp Union supermarket. The car had not been reported stolen, but its license plates were missing. Later on, though, Robert and his brother paid $1,500 to have the car returned. Why he only thought to report it then, the day after a quadruple murder nearby, was the question that emerged. The second car that was spotted in the grocery store parking lot the night of the killings was thought to be driven by Johnny Watson, the third person. Additionally, his DNA and that of one of the rocks found at the crime scene matched exactly. The community was finally rocked by a major development on June 6, 2022, when 3 men were officially charged with the Carnegie family's quadruple murder. In the lengthy investigation that had engulfed the area for years, this was a pivotal point. The arrest operation, which took place over several weeks and involved about 70 police officers from various counties, was carefully planned. The suspects, who were identified as Danny J. Kelly Jr., 43, Johnny James Watson, 49, and Robert James Watson, 50, were arrested in various locations throughout the state. About an hour later, Johnny Watson and Danny were arrested in their Bremerton apartments, while Robert Watson was stopped in traffic at Gig Harbor. The 3 men were charged with a total of 16 felonies each after being arrested and taken to nearby jails. These charges included first-degree burglary, first-degree arson, first-degree murder, and first-degree aggravated murder. A whopping $20 million was set as bail for each defendant. Each of the suspects entered a not guilty plea to the alleged felony charges. When they appeared in court the next morning, the judge placed severe restrictions on their possession of firearms, alcohol, and drugs unless prescribed, and ordered that they be detained without the possibility of release on bond. The court also ordered the defendants to refrain from any communication with one another. Investigators had established a specialized task force to investigate the quadruple homicide in response to the Carnegie family murders. The seriousness of the case and law enforcement's resolve to prosecute the offenders were highlighted by this cooperative effort. In the hopes that the arrests would be a major step toward closure for the families impacted by the tragic loss of the Carnegie family, the community awaited further developments in the legal proceedings. However, as people gathered to honor them, there was a glimmer of hope despite the gloom. Those affected by the tragedy eagerly awaited the 3 suspects in the Carnegie family murder case to be apprehended. Hunter Shope's mother, Carly Scott, had been praying for justice for years, and now her prayers had been heard. Over the years, she had pleaded so passionately for someone to come forward, and it was successful. The public provided the detectives with tips that enabled them to solve the case. Accused of ruthlessly murdering a whole family, the suspects were brought before a Kitsap County judge while being escorted into the courtroom and clearly restrained. The community was deeply scarred by their alleged crimes, which were motivated by disrespect and greed. Emotions were running high during the trial as relatives confronted the defendant and voiced their desire for justice. Given the seriousness of their acts, the suspects gave off an eerie aura. The arrests gave the victims' loved ones a sense of relief and closure despite the suffering and heartache, and this was evident throughout the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office as family members gathered to give detectives and one another nervous hugs following the arrest. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Elisa Claps, a high school student from Italy, disappeared in her hometown of Potenza in September 1993 D. She was unaccounted for almost 20 years. Elisa was last seen in person at the nearby Holy Trinity Church, where she had met up with a friend. It's commonly said that it's difficult to spot a dangerous criminal with a perverted mindset among regular people. Their ability to blend in is frightening. To those around them, they seem completely normal, average, and unremarkable. Their ability to cover their tracks, leaving crime scenes painstakingly devoid of evidence, is even more disturbing. This is the exact reason why it can be difficult for law enforcement to find and apprehend these criminals. It can take years, during which time they may carry out their heinous crimes. Let's examine this disturbing case now. On January 21, 1977, Elisa Maria Claps was born in the southern Italian town of Potenza, which is surrounded by mountains. She was the youngest of her family's 3 children. Her father ran a small tobacco shop, and her mother was a simple clerk. Elisa grew up with Gildo and Luciano, her 2 older brothers. The Claps family, who regularly attended Sunday services at their neighborhood church, was well known for being devout and strict. Driven by her desire to help people, Elisa was a bright and ambitious student who aspired to become a doctor. She was described as being very friendly, kind, and compassionate by those who knew her. She was naive and trusting at the same time, always having faith in other people. She had a natural ability to connect with people and quickly form friendships. Despite the attention she received from her peers, Elisa had never been in a romantic relationship by the time she turned 16. The boys at school definitely noticed her because of her lovely long hair and warm smile. However, because she came from a religious family, she graciously turned down every date invitation. In the early summer of 1993, an admirer became unsettlingly devoted. Danilo Restivo, a local, started displaying unwelcome and persistent interest in Elisa. The town was filled with disturbing rumors about Danilo, who was 5 years older. Elisa made an effort to avoid this strange man, who whenever he had the opportunity tried to entice her into remote areas. She was unable to be harsh or contemptuous due to her upbringing and innate kindness, and Danielle appeared to take her politeness as encouragement. In her private journal, Elisa wrote about Danielle, acknowledging that he both scared and made her feel sorry for him. Though she was careful never to be alone with him, she always tried to be polite because she saw how lonely and troubled he seemed. She always found a reason to get out of his presence as quickly as possible, usually by saying she had important errands to run. The Claps family took a vacation to the peaceful seaside town of Monte Giordano in the middle of August of that year. Elisa froze one day as she and her brother Gildo were walking through the quiet streets. She signaled to her brother not to leave her side by holding his hand tightly as Danilo approached them. As though they were old friends, Danilo greeted Elisa and even asked her to accompany him, insisting that he needed her help with something. Gildo knew right away that something was amiss. As he led his sister away, he made up an excuse. He later questioned Elisa about whether Danilo had harmed her and why she had reacted that way. Although the man had never physically hurt her, Elisa admitted that he had been following her and that she was afraid of him. Around 5 p.m. on September 11th, the Claps family's phone rang. Elisa responded, and as she conversed with the person on the other end, her attitude rapidly changed. Her brother did not miss the growing somber and agitated expression on her face. Galito inquired as to who had called after Elisa hung up. "It was Danilo," she said. Elisa adamantly declined Gildo's offer to confront him, claiming she could take care of it on her own. She thought she had everything under control and didn't want to cause any trouble. The enigmatical absence at church. Elisa's parents and brothers departed early on Sunday, September 12, 1993, for a day trip to Naples, which is roughly 90 miles away from Potenza. Elisa had remained behind, intending to join her close friend Elena for the morning service at the nearby church. Her family had returned from Naples by noon, and as everyone waited for Elisa and Elena, her mother made lunch. However, the girls had yet to return home as time went on. Someone knocked on the door at 1:45 p.m. Elena appeared nervous as she stood on the doorstep. She inquired as to Elisa's return, stating that they had become separated at the church and were unable to see one another. Elena claimed that she thought Elisa had already arrived at her house, but her account sounded flimsy, and she shifted uneasily, as though she were concealing something. Elena's distress increased when the family informed her that Elisa was still missing. She eventually acknowledged that she hadn't been truthful under duress. After the service, Elisa had actually stayed behind to talk to a young man. The 2 girls had planned to meet at the park afterwards before going to lunch, and the talk was only expected to last 10 minutes at most. However, neither 10 minutes nor an hour later did Elisa appear. As they conversed, Elisa grudgingly disclosed that Elisa's intended meeting with the young man was Danilo. Guldo's face turned pale at this. He alerted his brother and parents that Elisa might be in grave danger and that they should begin looking for her immediately. Danilo Restivo. Who was he? On April 3, 1972, Danilo Restivo was born in Irice, a tiny commune in the Sicilian province of Trapani. He came from a reasonably well-off family and was the youngest child. He was pampered and used to getting what he wanted as a child, and he was taught early on that there would never be any real repercussions for his actions. Regardless of the trouble he caused, his father was always there to support him. The Restivo family relocated to Potenza in the early 1980s, where Danilo's father, Mauricio, founded a prosperous company. In a matter of years, Mauricio rose to prominence as one of the richest and most powerful people in the city, developing close ties with local government and law enforcement. Danilo was notorious for being strange, impolite, and unsettlingly violent when he was in school. He was a reclusive and vicious youngster who was notorious for abusing animals, a habit that apparently gave him a deranged sense of fulfillment. In addition, he had a disturbing fixation on sharp objects. Despite being caught spying on girls in locker rooms on multiple occasions, Danilo appeared unaffected by any kind of intervention or discipline. He showed no remorse or desire to change, and he persisted in these actions with a stubborn, almost compulsive determination. Danilo Restivo had no true friends and was a recluse who was mostly shunned by his peers. He would frequently cut the hair of gullible girls because he had the unsettling habit of always having scissors with him. Parents complained repeatedly, but this unsettling behavior was ignored. Danilo would collect a large collection of hair clippings and take his trophies home. Strangely, his family didn't seem to notice any warning signs and instead dismissed this behavior as simple, childish mischief. Danilo's actions became more concerning as he grew older. His cruelty was not limited to animal abuse. He seemed to enjoy hurting other people. He still had trouble relating to people, especially girls, with whom he frequently acted aggressively and made an effort to threaten or harm them. The initial victim. Sonia, Danilo's younger cousin, was roughly a year and a half younger than him. They frequently walked home together from the same school. Danilo would often invite her to remote locations after class, making up a variety of reasons to entice her away. But Sonia was suspicious of her cousin. Her mother had specifically warned her not to go anywhere with him by herself, and her instincts told her to exercise caution. After promising to show Sonia a secret hiding place, Danilo was able to persuade her to follow him in the spring of 1987. Sensing that something was wrong, Sonia made the safe decision to bring her younger brother, Angelo, who was 11 years old. The three of them went into a wooded area where an old deserted shack stood after school. Danilo proposed a game in which players would be blindfolded. After Sonia and Angelo agreed to temporarily trust him, Danilo covered their eyes with blindfolds. There was a tense silence. Uneasy, Sonia shifted her blindfold just enough to get a glimpse and saw something horrifying. Her cousin was approaching Angelo, getting ready to attack, and taking a pair of scissors from his backpack. Sonia startled her younger brother by screaming as loudly as she could. Angelo jerked away in an instinctive reaction, still with his eyes covered. Danilo's hand swung down, but the scissors sliced his shoulder rather than his neck. Danilo appeared to be stunned by the sight of blood and Sonia's shrill cries, which allowed the kids to flee in the few seconds they had left. With their cries resonating through the forest, Sonia and Angelo fled the shack and fled for their lives. Danilo screamed threats and demanded they keep quiet about what had happened as he pursued them. Sonia and Angelo outran him and made it to safety, motivated by their instinct for survival and sheer terror. What had happened appalled the parents of the injured children. They hurried Angelo to the hospital, where medical professionals were able to treat him in time to save his life. Despite suffering severe blood loss and nearly dying, the boy managed to survive. The parents reported the incident to the local police that same day, filing charges for attempted assault with deadly intent, but the case was quickly dismissed, and Danilo was spared any serious repercussions. There were rumors that his father shielded his youngest son by using his considerable influence. With the help of a local priest, Mr. Restivo assured Angelo's family that Danilo would be committed to a mental health facility for required therapy in order to stop similar incidents in the future. He also paid the family a sizable amount in compensation and paid for Angelo's medical bills. Soon after, the parents of Sonia and Angelo made the decision to relocate their family to Naples in order to avoid any more interactions with their dangerous relative. Although Danilo's father made solemn vows, he never fulfilled them. Danilo never even saw a specialist and was never sent for treatment. Mr. Mauricio Restivo was too worried that his son's reputation and social standing would be permanently harmed if he were to be classified as mentally unstable or a danger to others by a formal psychiatric evaluation. A perilous preference. After parents and students repeatedly complained about Danilo's violent and intimidating behavior, he was expelled from 4 different schools. He ultimately had to turn to homeschooling to finish his coursework and obtain his diploma. Since he was considered physically capable of serving, Danilo was drafted into the military at the age of 18. However, due to his unpredictable and erratic behavior, he was released within a few months. He went back home and remained protected by his powerful and affluent father, who continued to absolve him of responsibility. Danilo's actions only became more unsettling with time. When he fell in love, he would stalk girls, spy on them through their windows, make eerie late-night phone calls while remaining silent, and harass them in an uncomfortable way. His attempts to show romantic interest frequently turned violent, including luring them to abandoned places or attempting to chop off strands of their hair. Danilo's responses to these girls' rejection of his advances were frightening. He sent them letters outlining his disturbing fantasies or packages containing fictitious explosive devices marked with words like boom. Since Danilo's father always stepped in to protect him, no amount of complaints to the authorities seemed to have any effect. Danilo felt unstoppable and above the law because of this ongoing cover-up. He seemed rather innocuous to outsiders, more like a peculiar locality than a cunning or dangerous person. People like Elisa felt sorry for him because of his dishonest appearance, and they even wished they could assist. The church is the target of the missing girl's search. Elisa's brothers and parents immediately began a frantic search. The local church where she was last seen was their first destination. Elisa had intended to confront Danilo Restivo that day to request that he stop pursuing her and give her some space. According to her friend, a number of witnesses were promptly located who attested to seeing the high school student conversing with Danilo outside the church. However, none of them were able to provide information regarding the two's subsequent whereabouts. In an effort to talk to Danilo, Elisa's mother tried calling the Restivo residence, but Mauricio, Danilo's father, picked up the phone and wouldn't let her talk to his son. The Claps family drove to the Restivo home, growing more and more alarmed, but nobody answered the door. They had no choice but to report Elisa missing to law enforcement. Maurizio met officers at the Restivo residence and informed them that his son had left for Naples on some errands and would not return until the next day. Authorities quickly learned, however, that Danilo was in fact at home. After returning home, the police demanded to speak with Danilo and took him to the station so they could question him. His father kept getting in the way, making it hard to get definitive answers, so they had to do this. Danilo's account was riddled with contradictions. He acknowledged that he had talked to Elisa at the church, but he said she had left shortly after, leaving him to pray. He gave a hazy and contradictory account, and it was obvious that he was lying because of his obvious nervousness. After leaving the church, Danilo was unable to explain where he had gone and was unable to produce the clothing he had been wearing that day, which he seemed to have thrown away. Additionally, investigators found a pair of his shoes that had been left in a bleach-filled tub for almost 2 days. Any possible blood traces had, of course, been eliminated. Danilo was unable to provide a satisfactory explanation for the suspicious cut on his hand, which detectives also noticed. He was unable to provide the precise location of the incident, but he stated that he tripped and cut himself on something sharp as he was leaving the church. His story was further undermined by the fact that the wound looked as though it had been caused by a sharp blade. The suspect is safe with the prosecutor. Danilo's father moved quickly to defend him in spite of his evasive behavior, refusal to give up his clothing and shoes for examination, and convoluted web of contradictory statements. Maurizio promptly engaged 2 of Naples' top defense lawyers to defend his son. In light of these challenges, the investigating police asked the city's chief prosecutor for authorization to acquire a warrant in order to search the suspect's house and confiscate his clothes and shoes in the hopes of discovering any evidence connecting him to Elisa's disappearance. They required legal authority. Surprisingly, the city's chief prosecutor showed no concern in the face of overwhelming evidence linking Danilo to the young girl's disappearance. He declined to grant a search warrant for either the church where Elisa was last seen or Danilo's house. The church was only briefly searched, and Father Domenico Sabbia, the lead priest, steadfastly refused to let anyone into the padlocked wooden staircase secured upstairs room. The prosecutor refused to issue a warrant to conduct a thorough investigation of the church and the rooms that are adjacent to it, despite pressure. Father Domenico suspiciously used the past tense when referring to Elisa right away, as though he was aware that she was dead. 3 weeks following Elisa's disappearance, Danilo was featured as the main suspect and his photo was displayed in a local news segment about the case. After this broadcast, dozens of women called the police station to report that Danilo had been harassing and stalking them. They disclosed his unsettling fixation on women's hair and his propensity to carry scissors, which he used to try to covertly chop off strands of hair from gullible victims in parks, city streets, and even on public transit. Dedicated investigators' persistence allowed them to ultimately accuse Danilo of making false statements. He received a sentence of 2.5 years in prison in the spring of 1995. However, his sentence was commuted to community service, ironically at the same church where Elisa had vanished, after less than 2 months in prison. A new investigation and a new prosecutor. When police detained a criminal organization's leader in 1999, the investigation into Elisa's disappearance came to a standstill. Despite his lack of knowledge regarding Elisa's case, he revealed damaging details about the city's top prosecutor. He claimed that the prosecutor had engaged in corruption by taking bribes, concealing crimes, and purposefully sabotaging investigations. These claims led to a major shift, even though they were regarded as hearsay and the informant was subsequently charged with defamation. Elisa's case was given to a new lead investigator and prosecutor, who essentially began from scratch. They were eventually given a search warrant for Danilo's home this time. The search turned up something concerning, even though the exact clothes and shoes he had worn on the day Elisa vanished were not there. Danilo's room was filled with a large collection of hair strands from many different girls. Investigators discovered a sizable box containing pictures of nude and semi-nude women beneath Danilo's bed. By spying on his victims in showers, locker rooms, fitting rooms, and even through their home windows, he had taken these pictures himself. Sadly, he also retained a different collection of pictures showing women who had had limbs amputated. Although his severe psychological problems were evident, this did not lead to any new information in the case of Elisa Claps, who went missing. 6 years after Elisa's disappearance, police attempted to search the church once more, but Father Domenico refused to let them into the locked upstairs room. By using his connections and portraying the investigation as an effort to desecrate a place of worship, he went to considerable measures to stop the search, and even mobilized churchgoers against the officers. A letter from the beyond and a move. Even after the new investigation, Danilo left his hometown and set out on a lengthy journey across Europe because there was no conclusive evidence against him. He persisted in stalking women and cutting their hair whenever he could, but he had to be more careful without the protection of his powerful father. Danilo would immediately relocate to a different city or even a different nation if his actions were likely to result in legal repercussions. An unexpected letter, purportedly written by Elisa herself, was delivered to the Claps family in the early 2000s SS. According to the message, she was still alive and well and had fled to Brazil with a romantic partner. The author requested that her family not try to find her or get in touch. However, the handwriting clearly differed from Elisa's. By comparing it to her personal diary and school notebooks, anyone could see the difference. In addition, there were numerous obvious grammatical mistakes in the letter, indicating that the author was not well educated. Unsurprisingly, the Claps family's own investigation revealed Danilo to be the source of their suspicions. He had somehow chosen to write the letter while he was visiting his parents, posing as Elisa in an unsuccessful attempt to deceive her loved ones. A fresh victim. Heather Barnett, 48, was killed in a vicious crime that shook the sleepy British town of Bournemouth on November 12, 2002. When her 2 teenage children got home from school, they made the terrible discovery. The mutilated and lifeless body of Heather was discovered in a pool of blood on the bathroom floor. Her skull displayed evidence of multiple blunt force trauma, most likely from a hammer blow, and her throat had been slashed. The removal of her breasts and their placement next to her head, however, was the most unsettling part of the crime. A lock of hair that wasn't Heather's was in her hand. There had been no struggle to tear this hair out. The scissors had cut it neatly. Furthermore, Heather had had a portion of her own hair cut. These unsettling specifics raised the possibility that the crime was ritualistic. Investigators quickly focused on Fiamma Marsango and her husband Danilo Restivo, Heather's odd neighbors. The victim's house was only a short distance away from the couple's residence, which was next door. Danilo had approached her inappropriately, and Heather had complained about him on multiple occasions. She told a friend that she was afraid of her husband, even though they were married, right before the crime. Heather took custom orders from her home and worked as a seamstress. Under the guise of commissioning clothing, Danilo frequently attempted to visit her. He insisted on going inside to discuss specifics, even though he never placed any specific orders. Heather discovered her house keys were gone 2 days prior to the tragedy, following one of Danilo's visits. At the time, she assumed she had just lost them and didn't relate this to her neighbor. Regretfully, she hadn't managed to change the locks yet. Even before the police and emergency personnel arrived, Danilo was among the first individuals on the scene. He said he was on his way home when he heard Heather's kids screaming in terror and hurried to assist. Officers brought him in for interrogation, but they soon let him go because he seemed incompetent and unthreatening. But after his most recent visit, Heather's kids pointed to him as a cause for concern, stating that they were also uncomfortable around their odd neighbor and brought up the missing keys. The police chose to closely monitor Danilo because they had no immediate reason to search his house. They soon discovered him performing a disturbing act. Danilo was discovered stalking a young woman and trying to cut a lock of her hair while holding scissors on the street. He was taken into custody by officers, who also searched his car and requested his identification. They discovered an unsettling assortment in the trunk, including extra pairs of shoes, a change of clothes, and a set of knives. This, along with his questionable actions, ultimately produced sufficient proof to secure a search warrant for his home. When investigators searched Danilo Restivo's house, they were shocked by what they found. They discovered multiple albums containing hair he had cut from different women. Sneakers and clothing were soaking in a tub filled with bleach in the bathroom. The missing keys belonging to Heather Barnett, which are currently in Restivo's room, were the most damning piece of evidence. Although there were blood traces on the clothes, the samples were too badly ruined by the bleach to be identified. But Danilo's DNA was found on a towel in Heather's restroom, indicating that he used it to wipe blood splatter off his face. A body in the attic of the church, and 2 beliefs. Authorities discovered Danilo's troubling past as they investigated the murder of Heather Barnett. He had been the main suspect in the disappearance of a high school girl in his hometown 9 years prior. The girl's body had never been found at the time, and investigators had not discovered enough conclusive evidence. But now that there was ample evidence of his violent tendencies and no powerful father to defend him, Danilo was put on trial, convicted of premeditated murder, and given a 40-year prison term without the chance of release. Then, in the attic of the same church where Elisa Claps had last been sighted, construction workers found her mummified remains in March 2010, 17 years after she had vanished. Father Domenico Sabbia had refused to let the police in through the locked door, concealing her body. Although it was obvious that Father Domenico had kept a horrible secret, he had long since died by this point, and it was impossible to pinpoint exactly what part he'd played in hiding the crime. There were unsettling parallels between Elisa's body and Heather Barnett's case. The cause of death was a slashed throat, and her chest had been similarly mutilated. Her underwear had also been soiled, indicating a violent personal attack. Bloodstains on Elisa's deteriorated clothing matched those of Restivo, who had hurt himself during the attack, and fingerprints were found at the scene. An uncanny signature that mirrored the evidence from Heather's murder was a lock of hair in Elisa's hand that wasn't hers. Since Restivo was already serving his 40-year sentence in the UK, he was tried in absentia for Elisa Clapp's murder. He was found guilty once more based on overwhelming evidence, and this time he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. He will be extradited to Italy to serve an extra 30 years for the heinous attack on Elisa. after serving his sentence in the UK. Although Restivo's involvement in other unsolved murders and disappearances has not been proven, authorities suspect that he may have had many more victims. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The video you just watched was recorded right before Christopher Greger realized that the police had finally discovered his son's whereabouts. Christopher's life was forever altered by a single, terrible, and heartbreaking secret recording. When Corey was brought to the hospital in critical condition, the police were called. Corey's father had darker plans for his own son, but Corey only wanted to please him and keep him happy. The community would be shocked when all of Christopher's sinister secrets were exposed. A tragedy happened on April 2, 2021, a few days after the unsettling video of Corey running by himself on the treadmill was released. Around 4 p.m., Corey's father, 31-year-old Christopher Greger, found his son completely still and unconscious. Corey was taken right away to Southern Ocean County Medical Center in Stafford the next day, where he was examined by qualified medical professionals. The fight to save the child started inside the room. The doctors worked quickly and diligently, but Corey's condition deteriorated. He had a seizure during a CT scan, which made his already precarious condition even worse. At 5:03 p.m., Corey died in spite of all efforts to save him. April 2, 2021. However, something even more horrifying was about to be discovered by the doctors. They found multiple bruises on Corey's body as they examined him. Additionally, the treadmill video alluded to a sinister possibility and nearly provided an explanation for how such a tragic event could have occurred. The entire community would be shocked by the shocking information that the investigation would reveal. However, the case took another unexpected turn. Christopher, Corey's father, called Child Protection Services immediately after the doctors declared him dead. He stated that Corey had been with his mother, Brianna Micciolo, on April 1, 2021. She soon found herself at the center of an expanding investigation, but some information about his parents' upbringing would eventually point to a dark trend. The story started in 2014, when Brianna Miccioli, Corey's mother, became pregnant with Corey. Christopher Greger was the father. At first, Christopher didn't even know Corey existed. Authorities first discovered Christopher as Corey's potential father when Brianna applied for state assistance. A paternity test in 2018 verified that Corey's father was in fact Corey's father. The parents' dispute over custody began at this point. They had never been married, so they weren't divorced, but they both wanted to be in charge of raising Corey. Although it took almost a year for Christopher to start seeing Corey, he began to abide by child support orders as the custody dispute progressed. Following a court settlement, Christopher was given custody of Corey during the week. In the end, they resided in Monroe with Christopher's parents, but he eventually moved to Barnegat. At first, Brianna supported this choice because she thought it was crucial for Corey to have a relationship with his father in order to give his life a sense of completion. However, this choice would permanently alter her life. Brianna became aware of some oddities as Corey started to spend more time with his father. Brianna once saw that Corey had a busted lip when he came home from his father's custody. Christopher said it had happened by accident during a soccer match when she questioned him about it. It would not be long before the terrible reality of the situation was revealed, but it wasn't the only instance. Brianna discovered injuries on Corey's face, arms, and legs shortly after he returned from Christopher's house around Halloween 2019. Additionally, there was a noticeable slap mark on Corey's face. Corey was too afraid to respond when Brianna questioned him about it, but Brianna soon discovered that Christopher was the one torturing his own son. She made the decision to act to protect him because she knew something was seriously amiss. She informed the Division of Child Protection and Permanency, DCPP, and the police about Christopher's behavior, but the authorities did nothing about the complaints. Despite Brianna's best efforts, nothing was done and the case was closed. This was only the beginning of a trend in which Brianna's concerns were disregarded by the authorities. Christopher accused Brianna of drug addiction and demanded full custody of Corey as soon as she complained. By March 2020, The court had given Christopher sole custody of Corey, leaving Brianna with only visitation rights. Brianna persisted even after losing the fight for custody of Corey. She recorded several cases of Corey's body having bite marks and inexplicable bruises. She repeatedly warned the State Child Protective Services caseworker, but her requests were largely ignored. Corey frequently had fingerprints on his arms and legs when he got home, and once he had blood accumulating at the corners of his eyes. Years went by with the authorities taking no meaningful action, and his father's abuse persisted. Christopher was still in complete custody, in spite of Brianna's protests. But on April 1, 2021, a devastating discovery altered everything. When Corey visited with his mother, he told her about the treadmill incident. He disclosed that he had been made to run at an abnormally high speed by his father weeks prior. The events of that day were also captured on CCTV. On March 20, 2021, Christopher and Corey were seen on camera entering the Atlantic Heights Clubhouse Fitness Center. Even after Corey fell several times, the video showed Christopher pushing him onto the treadmill and then raising the difficulty levels. However, this was not even the most devastating aspect. Christopher thought his son needed a lot of exercise because he was overweight. Christopher's abuse of his son was evident. Brianna acted right away after being horrified by Corey's remarks regarding his father. She reported the abuse to authorities the next day and requested emergency custody of Corey. However, there was yet another disappointment. The family court judge rejected Brianna's request, despite her urgent pleas, claiming that Corey was not in immediate danger. They had no idea that danger was lurking around every corner. But that same day, April 1, 2021, in the afternoon, Brianna took Corey to a nearby hospital to have his bruises examined. After examining Corey, the doctors told Brianna that he was fine despite a few bruises on his body. As a result, he was released at around 1 in the morning. On the same day, Christopher insisted on taking Corey back, even though Brianna wanted to keep him with her. Everything changed at approximately 9 a.m. on April 2, 2021. While in Christopher's care, Corey became very sick and unresponsive. Tragically, Corey was declared dead a few hours after Christopher hurried him to the hospital on April 2 at approximately 4 p.m. Christopher's response stunned everyone even more. Christopher held Brianna accountable for Corey's demise. He had recently lost his son, so it seemed strange that he was assigning blame so soon after the tragedy. However, this was only the start. The story was about to take more turns. After learning of Corey's passing, Christopher chose to spend 3 months out of state rather than grieving for his son right away. He once more tried to place the blame on Brianna, Corey's mother, after the police apprehended him. Brianna was devastated when she learned of her son's passing. She was overcome with grief and regret for all the choices that had resulted in Corey being placed in his father's custody, which ultimately had a terrible consequence. However, she was committed to using the legal system to secure justice for Corey. The trial to ascertain the cause of Corey Misciolo's death finally started. Christine Lento, the prosecutor, began the trial on April 30, 2024, by claiming that they had enough proof to charge Christopher with killing his son Corey. Lento asserted with assurance that Corey's death was caused by his father's ongoing abuse. However, Mario Gallucci, Christopher's lawyer, refuted these allegations by presenting Christopher as a responsible father. Gallucci maintained that the treadmill video was unrelated to Corey's demise and proposed that Corey passed away from sepsis, an infection found during a medical examination. There were conflicting views regarding Corey's cause of death, which led to a legal battle. As evidence was presented and witnesses testified, this legal battle took an intriguing turn. The case initially started to show how Christopher mistreated his son. The first witness called by the prosecutor was Corey's first-grade teacher. The teacher stated in her testimony that she frequently observed bruises on Corey's body after March 2021, when he was in his father's custody. She also noticed a discernible shift in Corey's conduct at school. He was quieter and more reclusive. The purpose of these observations was to highlight the possible abuse that Corey endured while under his father's supervision. In addition, Dr. Ye Qiaowang testified before the jury about Corey's April 1, 2021 visit with him, together with his mother. Dr. Ye Qiaowang clarified that he saw marks that indicated bleeding beneath the skin in addition to bruises all over Corey's body, especially on his chest. Dr. Young confirmed that he did not see sepsis symptoms when Corey was released from the hospital when the prosecutor asked him if he did. According to this testimony, Corey's death was not caused by an infection. Additionally, according to Dr. Ye Qiaowang's testimony, Corey seemed healthy prior to his April 2, 2021 visit to his father's home, raising the possibility that something happened while Corey was in his father's custody. William Doyle, a triage nurse at Southern Ocean Medical Center, was called as a witness to provide information about Corey's condition following his visit with his father. Doyle described how he witnessed Christopher take Corey to the ER on April 2, 2021, which helped to clarify Corey's condition when he got to the hospital. When Dr. William Doyle first saw Corey, the prosecutor asked him what he noticed. Corey's serious and critical condition when he arrived at the hospital was justified by Dr. Doyle's statements. In order to refute the charges, the defense attorney asked Carolyn Greger, Christopher's mother, to testify about the calls she got from Christopher about Corey and the reasons he made the decision to leave right away. Carolyn began by saying that she had been informed about Corey's condition. Christopher had implied that Brianna might have done something wrong to Corey, she said. She continued by saying that they began getting threatening phone calls at random, accusing Christopher of being a murderer. Christopher chose to escape because of this. Additionally, Brianna had come to their home and threatened them, according to Christopher's mother. Carolyn, however, clarified during the judge's questioning that Brianna never threatened to attack them or set fire to their home. She only clarified that she was referring to the treadmill video when she mentioned Brianna making threatening calls. Attorney Mario Gallucci also introduced Christopher's father, David Greger, a retired New Jersey State Police officer who testified about his first encounter with Corey. The emotional side of Christopher's parents was brought to light by this testimony. When David talked about his only grandson, Corey, he was clearly emotional. David told the defense attorney that he didn't want to watch the treadmill video footage because he didn't want it to be his final recollection of Corey. He acknowledged that Christopher had mistreated Corey in the treadmill video, though. Thus, despite attorney Mario Gallucci's tenacious defense of Christopher, all the facts and assertions were deemed unfounded when prosecutor Christine Lento produced the most important piece of evidence, the manner of death, which established Christopher's guilt for his son's passing. Corey passed away from blunt impact injuries to his chest and abdomen, which included liver laceration and contusion, left pulmonary contusion, and heart laceration. These injuries in Corey's case could not have been caused intentionally by him. Certainly, it wasn't suicide. The distribution and pattern of these injuries support the idea that they were caused by someone else. Therefore, from the perspective of a medical examiner, homicide is defined as any death that is connected to the actions of another person from an epidemiological or public health perspective. According to crucial testimony from Dr. Thomas Andrew, Corey's fatal injuries resulted from blunt force trauma to his chest and abdomen, which caused a large laceration in his heart. His professional evaluation categorically categorized Corey's death as a homicide, stressing that the seriousness of these wounds suggested intentional human behavior rather than unintentional causes. He added that the forensic test revealed no evidence of a sepsis in fact. However, this conflict did not stop there. One more testimony remained. Dr. Michael Baden, another forensic pathologist, gave the Ocean County jurors an opposing viewpoint. According to Dr. Baden, Corey's death was due to natural causes, such as pneumonia complications. Dr. Andrews' conclusions and interpretation were directly at odds with this testimony. Jurors in Christopher Greger's trial had to carefully consider the evidence put forth by both sides due to the case's complexity caused by the divergent expert opinions. Lento claimed that the treadmill footage that the prosecutor's office had recovered spoke for itself, notwithstanding the defense's claims that Corey passed away from natural causes like sepsis or pneumonia. That video contained all the information the jury required. The last day of judgment to decide whether Christopher was guilty or not was May 31, 2024. The jury ultimately rendered a decision after taking into account all of the evidence that was put forth by the defense and prosecutor. Christopher was convicted of endangering a child's welfare and aggravated manslaughter. The more serious murder charge against him, however, was dropped. Potential prison terms for aggravated manslaughter ranged from 10 to 30 years. Christopher might have received a life sentence, though, if he had been found guilty of murder. The courtroom was filled with a range of emotions following the jury's verdict, with some people feeling relieved and at peace, and others feeling sad and incredulous. The entire scope of Christopher's punishment would be decided at his sentencing hearing on August 20, 2024. A civil court battle also took place in the midst of the criminal proceedings. Corey's mother, Brianna Micciolo, filed a lawsuit against the DCPP, claiming that their carelessness and inaction had not shielded Corey from the abuse that finally claimed his life. With the help of advocacy organizations and those who shared her values, Brianna's efforts to effect change grew stronger. The tragic tale of Corey Micciolo serves as a reminder of children's vulnerabilities and our shared duty to protect them. However, it raises the question, did the jury make the correct choice? And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The nation was rocked by the disappearance of Adam Walsh from Hollywood, Florida, on July 27, 2981. He vanished from a nearby Sears store, and the ensuing investigation was beset by misunderstandings and errors, leaving detectives frustrated and with dead ends. Adam's family was left in despair when police were unable to piece together a clear timeline or motive, despite a plethora of leads. What serious errors occurred during this investigation, and how did the pursuit of justice come to a standstill? Let's examine the specifics. Reeve and John Walsh welcomed Adam Walsh into the world in Hollywood, Florida. He was a normal child who made his parents happy, loved baseball, and was quiet. But after going missing on July 27, 1981, when he was 6 years old, he became well known. Adam and his mother, Reeve, went shopping at the Hollywood Mall that summer afternoon. They went directly to the Sears store after entering the mall via the north entrance. Reeve was there with a specific goal in mind: to ask questions regarding a lamp that was for sale. She left Adam at a kiosk with Atari 2600 video games, where a number of other boys were gathered and playing the games, to keep him occupied while she took care of her business. Around 12:15 p.m., Rev finished her questions in the lamp department and went back to the kiosk where she had left Adam. Adam and the other boys were gone, and she was shocked to find this out. Rev was overcome with fear, as any parent would be when they lose sight of their child. She was told by a store manager that the boys had gotten into a fight over who would get to play the video games first. A security guard responded to the commotion by telling the boys to leave the store. The older boys responded that their parents were not present in the store when the guard asked them if they were. This implied that Adam, who was quieter and younger, probably lacked an adult companion to provide him with support at that time. Adam was a shy kid, and Rev later surmised that he might have been too scared to speak up when the security guard was questioning him. She thought the guard likely didn't realize Adam was alone, because he thought he was one of the boys. The security officer forced Adam to leave through the same door that the other boys had used to enter the store, the Sears West entrance. Adam's parents were increasingly worried about his safety after he went outside because they thought he had lost contact with the group and was now alone in a strange place. As the minutes went by, Rev frantically looked around the toy section for Adam, but was unable to locate him. Her panic increased in intensity with every second that went by. She asked the store staff to shout his name over the loudspeakers in a last-ditch effort to find him, hoping that if Adam heard it, he would come back to her. She kept searching the store, calling out his name and searching every hallway in the hopes of finding him while she awaited a response. She happened to run into Jean, her mother-in-law, who volunteered to assist in finding Adam right away. They searched the store together, asking staff and other customers if they had seen him. But after searching for more than 90 minutes and calling on Adam several times without finding him, Rev realized that time was of the essence. She had a growing fear in her heart that something horrible had occurred. She made the difficult choice to call the Hollywood police at 1:55 p.m. with a heavy heart and a sense of urgency. She had no idea that her worst nightmare was going to come true. A massive search for her son was launched in response to this call, with ground crews searching the area for any hints and helicopters hovering overhead. A horrifying find was made in a drainage canal next to the Florida Turnpike, close to Vero Beach, on August 10, On closer examination, 2 fishermen saw what appeared to be the head of a baby doll floating in the water, but it turned out to be a child's detached head. They called the police right away, horrified. The Indian River County Sheriff's Office sent Detective Ralphie Latimer Jr. and a deputy to the scene to conduct an investigation. Regretfully, no additional remains were discovered during the canal search conducted by divers from Indian River County and St. Lucie County. Adam's parents, meanwhile, continued to hope that their son was still alive. They were left to look for him by themselves, heartbroken and feeling totally powerless. The FBI's National Crime Database at the time allowed reports of stolen vehicles including horses, but there was no mechanism in place for missing children. Because of this, law enforcement was unable to communicate important details about missing children, giving the impression that Adam might be anywhere. Adam's parents made a public plea for their son's safe return on the Good Morning America television show on the morning of August 11th. In the hopes that their message would strike a chord with viewers and inspire anyone with information to come forward, they shared their anguish and desperation. Additionally, they promised a $100,000 reward for any leads that could lead to Adam's location. This outreach emphasized the gravity and urgency of the situation and was a component of their attempt to engage the community in the search. The medical examination was essential in identifying the recovered remains as the investigation progressed. Adam's dental chart and the severed head discovered in the canal were thoroughly examined by the coroner's office. One notable similarity that emerged from this comparison was a filling on the cheek side of a lower left molar. This distinctive dental feature verified that the remains were, in fact, those of Adam Walsh. The coroner then conducted an autopsy to ascertain the cause of death. Adam had died from asphyxiation, according to the examination, which indicated a lack of oxygen because of an obstruction of the airway. This suggested that the act was violent and planned. In addition, the condition of his remains indicated that Adam had most likely passed away a few days prior to his head being found. Adam's death was officially declared a homicide by the coroner, which horribly confirmed the worst suspicions. Despite thorough searches of the canal and the surrounding areas, the remainder of Adam's body was never found, which presented a major challenge to the investigation. The nation was shocked when Adam's head was found 130 miles from his Hollywood home. People were saddened and deeply disturbed by the heinous crime. The way the Hollywood Police Department conducted the investigation into their son's disappearance infuriated John and Reeve Walsh. They believed the case was not handled with the necessary urgency from the beginning, which resulted in a disjointed response that made them feel powerless. John took action to bring attention to Adam in those early days. He held press conferences, distributed flyers featuring Adam's photo, and contacted the local media to request information. In addition to finding Adam, they wanted to force a more exhaustive police investigation. They argued for a thorough investigation of every lead during their meetings with law enforcement. They persisted in trying, but the police's lack of cooperation demoralized them more and more. John became a vocal critic of the investigation as a result of his frustration, which eventually influenced his subsequent public policy work. Their message was further amplified by John Walsh's hosting of the 1988 premiere of the television program America's Most Wanted. The program developed into a potent vehicle for bringing attention to wanted criminals and missing children, in order to encourage viewers to pay attention and report any information they may have. Each episode included segments on current missing child cases. In addition to educating the public about the realities of child abduction, the series gave law enforcement a way to ask for community assistance. The life of convicted serial killer Otis Elwood Toole was filled with violence, abuse, and chaos. Toole was born in Jacksonville, Florida, on March 5, 1947. His early years were characterized by an abusive mother who dressed him in girl clothes and called him Susan, an alcoholic father who abandoned him, and a maternal grandmother who exposed him to satanic rituals and practices. His older sister and a neighbor next door were among the many family members and acquaintances who sexually assaulted him. With an IQ of 75, Toole was categorized as having mildly disabled intellectual capacity. Due to his epilepsy, he frequently had grand mal seizures. Toole visited gay bars and became a prostitute as a teenager. At the age of 14, he allegedly committed his first murder in 1961 after being coerced into having sex by a traveling salesman. In the 9th grade, Toole left school and started living on the streets of the southwestern United States, earning a living through panhandling and prostitution. Toole, then 17 years old, was arrested for loitering in August 1965. Although there is little evidence of his activities after this arrest, authorities believe he drifted around the southwestern United States between 1966 and 1973, making a living through panhandling and prostitution. Toole was implicated in the 1974 murder of Patricia Webb, a 24-year-old woman in Nebraska. He left Nebraska shortly after and briefly made Boulder, Colorado, his home. His stay was brief, though, as he quickly emerged as a leading suspect in the October 14, 1974 murder of 31-year-old Ellen Holman. Toole's private life was a mystery in the years that followed. He hitched a ride in the American South and drifted back to Jacksonville in early 1975 D. Toole married a woman 25 years his senior on January 14, 1976. But their marriage didn't last long. When his wife found out he was gay, she left him 3 days later. Later on, Toole disclosed that his marriage was an attempt to conceal his actual sexual orientation. Toole was taken into custody for an unrelated arson incident in April 1983, while George Sonnenberg, 65, was inside his house. He had set it on fire. For the horrifying arson attack, Toole was taken into custody, admitted to the crime, and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Toole, however, stated at his trial for killing George Sonnenberg that he only signed the confession to be sent back to Jacksonville and did not set the house on fire. He was given a death sentence for first-degree murder, but it was later reduced to life in prison. Toole, who was already serving a prison sentence for 2 unconnected killings, shockingly admitted to killing Adam Walsh on October 21, 1983. John Walsh, Adam's father, was convinced that Toole had committed the crime despite the lack of hard proof. According to Toole, he promised Adam candy and toys to entice him into his white 1971 Cadillac sedan DeVille, which had a noticeable dent on the right bumper. At first, Toole said Adam was quiet and cooperative as they traveled north on Interstate 95 toward Jacksonville, but as time went on, Adam started to get anxious. In a shocking development, Toole said he struck Adam in the face. He claimed that when things became more heated, he hit Adam once more, knocking him out. Toole continued north on the Florida Turnpike to an abandoned service road north of the Raid Bar Road overpass in northwest St. Lucie County while Adam was hurt. Toole used his car's seatbelt to strangle Adam to death after realizing he was still alive. He then allegedly used a hatchet to decapitate Adam after dragging his lifeless body out of the car. Toole later stated that he destroyed Adam's remains in an old refrigerator as part of his disposal process. He claimed he wanted to adopt Adam after he got back to Jacksonville, but that plan wasn't seen as feasible. The blood-stained carpet from the car, the hatchet allegedly used in the murder, and eventually the car itself were among the important pieces of evidence that police lost during the course of the investigation. This evidence loss was a major blow to the investigation. However, Toole was never formally charged or found guilty of Adam's murder because there was not enough tangible evidence. Toole initially admitted to the crime, but later recanted his admission, casting doubt on the case. In addition to depriving Adam's family of the justice they were entitled to, this lack of accountability also raised grave questions regarding the efficiency of the investigation and the handling of evidence in such dire circumstances. There are serious concerns regarding Otis Toole's possible involvement, because multiple witnesses located him in the Hollywood region in the days preceding Adam's disappearance. Toole, who was serving a life sentence for other offenses, passed away in prison in September 1996 at the age of 49 from cirrhosis after a long and difficult life. According to his niece, he confessed to Adam's murder on his deathbed after he passed away. On October 10, 1983, the television movie Adam, which told the tragic tale of Adam Walsh's kidnapping and murder, debuted. When it first aired, it attracted 38 million viewers and significantly increased public awareness of child abduction. In 1983, 1984, and 1985, each broadcast included a hotline for tips along with images and descriptions of missing children. 13 of the 55 children who were highlighted were able to recover successfully as a result of this initiative. The American rapper Busy Bone was reunited with his mother after a babysitter recognized his photo during the broadcast, making it a noteworthy case. The Walsh family changed the way society views missing children by using Adam to transform their tragedy into a potent advocacy tool. Additionally, in 1984, the U.S. John and Reeve Walsh, along with other parents of missing children, tirelessly lobbied Congress to pass the Missing Children's Assistance Act. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCEMEC, an organization devoted to offering resources, support, and advocacy for missing children and their families, was made possible by this important legislation. The act sought to strengthen the response to kidnappings of children and guarantee that law enforcement had the resources and direction required to successfully handle these tragic situations. After John Walsh's book was published, Hollywood Police Chief Rick Stone conducted a thorough review in 1997, which sparked a renewed effort to look into Adam's case. Prior to being named Hollywood's chief of police the year before, Stone had 22 years of law enforcement experience, having worked for the Dallas, Texas, and Wichita, Kansas departments. Stone carefully examined the evidence, even going back to Toole's recorded interrogations by Hollywood detective Mark Smith, even though the crime had taken place 16 years prior. After reviewing, Stone came to the conclusion that Toole had killed Adam with proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Toole and Henry Lee Lucas, his partner, had admitted to or linked themselves to over 200 murders, many of which turned out to be untrue. The majority of Lucas's confessions were actually discovered to have been forced by the police, which further calls into question the veracity of Toole's statements. After Adam Walsh's father called the America's Most Wanted hotline to voice concerns about his son's pedophilia, Jeffrey Dahmer was named as a suspect in the case in 2007. At the time of Adam's kidnapping, Dahmer had resided in Miami Beach, which is close to Hollywood. Both recognized Dahmer from pictures following his arrest, and witnesses claimed to have seen a suspicious young blonde man at the Hollywood Mall on the day Adam vanished. Furthermore, just before Adam's severed head was found, a truck driver claimed to have seen a man driving a blue van close to a canal. However, police rejected his account. John Walsh voiced doubts about any link between Dahmer and the murder of his son, pointing to a dearth of evidence, even though Dahmer denied any involvement in Adam's case. Due to his 2-week absence from home in 1981 and the installation of a new seat cover in his vehicle soon after Adam's disappearance, Edward James, another suspect, sparked suspicions. Investigators cleared him after a voice stress analysis revealed no deceit. Only incomplete dental records were used to identify the child, and there was no autopsy report. Even though the Walsh family acknowledged Otis Toole's guilt, these unanswered questions cast doubt on the case's legacy. With John Walsh at his side, Hollywood Police Chief Chad Wagner declared the case closed on December 16, 2008. The police came to the conclusion that Otis Toole was the murderer following an outside review. Following Adam's tragic story, legislative efforts kept changing. On July 25, 2006, the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act was passed by President George W. Bush, who signed it into law a few days later. This historic act strengthened punishments for violent crimes against children, put policies in place to prevent human trafficking, and created a national database for convicted juvenile offenders. The Adam Walsh Reauthorization Act, which was introduced in 2016, made sure that programs established under the 2006 Act had the money they needed to continue their essential work. This law, which was a part of the Survivors' Bill of Rights, demonstrated a strong dedication to protecting children. Even though Adam Walsh's passing is a tragic chapter in American history, his narrative has sparked important change. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. On February 27, 2017, the 1-year-old Valerie Arrow was found dead in her home. The scene that unfolded before the eyes of the police was shocking in its cruelty. Valerie lay on the bed wearing a bathrobe, her wrists bound with a shoelace, and a scarf in her mouth as a gag. It was soaked in blood that had flowed from her throat. The room's floor was covered with the torn underwear of the girl, ripped in half. One obvious injury on her body was a strangulation mark on her neck. The police had even more to ponder after the autopsy. The toxicological analysis revealed that Valerie had been under the influence of multiple substances, and 2 scarves were discovered deep in her throat. They were so numerous that they might have killed her on their own. In addition, Valerie's backpack was discovered in the trash a few days prior by a building worker where the girl resided. Her papers, an ashtray, cigarette butts, a glass, shoes, apartment keys, and a blood-stained bedside lamp were all found inside. After compiling this data, the investigators came to the conclusion that the girl had committed suicide on her own volition. The matter was resolved. Naturally, Valerie's family was not pleased with this conclusion and made vain attempts to convince the police to look into the case as a murder. A girl named Law Martin's wallet and documents were discovered by hikers on the Fenway Trail 11 months later. The same day, they found the dead body of a 19-year-old girl in Bon Roppers Roquette in a canal about 20 kilometers away. She had taken off her socks and was completely nude. Law, who had been absent for 2 days, was there. According to the autopsy, the girl was strangled to death, but before she passed away, she had been sexually assaulted both vaginally and anally, using what appeared to be a baseball bat. The forensic specialist also discovered a torn spleen, which suggests a very powerful abdominal blow, like a kick. Despite starting an investigation, the police were unable to find any solid leads. Furthermore, nobody ever thought to link the 2 cases together, of course. After 7 years, the morning of February 11, 1997, arrived. In Toulouse, firefighters broke into a 4th-floor apartment in a multi-story building at 9 in the morning. They found a 29-year-old woman named Martin Matten's charred and lifeless body inside. Martin was on the bed, face down. There was a magazine from an automatic pistol on the floor and a ripped and blood-stained bra in the bathroom. Blood was all over the carpet and the bathtub, and a light bulb that had been unscrewed was lying on the floor. The firefighters came to the conclusion that there were 2 fires, 2 obvious attempts at intentional arson in the living room by the armchair and in the bedroom. After weighing all of the available evidence, the investigating police inspector came to the conclusion that Martin's death was caused by a choice she made. Emily Espies, then 21 years old, went into a Toulouse bar 10 days later, on February 26, 1997. She wanted to grab a drink with her friends in the afternoon. She met Patrice, a nice and attractive man in the bar. Because he gave Emily and her friends illegal drugs, he had his own method of luring girls. The rest of the day and the next morning were spent with Patrice and Emily. The young man asked Emily to accompany him to a concert that he was planning to attend that evening. He invited her and she accepted. They did, however, meet up with Patrice's friend Eve, whom he had been living with for a while prior to the concert. The young people in the group shared a meal and some beverages. After that, Patrice and Emily headed to the concert in Patrice's car, arriving at around 1:30 a.m. While Patrice spent more time drinking beer at the bar, Emily danced a lot. Emily asked her new acquaintance to drive her home at around 2 in the morning because she was exhausted from not sleeping for 2 days. The tired girl fell asleep right away, before she had even had a chance to sit in the car. She was lying on the back seat of the car when she woke up, even though it felt like only a moment had gone by. Emily opened her eyes and was shocked to see that she was being choked by Patrice, a buffer with protruding eyes. He was no longer the nice guy she'd spent the entire day with. How someone could spend a whole day with such a nice guy and then, in just 1 minute, transform into a monster who was now strangling her was beyond Emily's comprehension. Emily made an effort to resist. She tried to rip Patrice's hair, screamed and scratched him. Emily passed out after he repeatedly hit her face and told her to stop talking. She woke up without her underwear a few minutes later. She must have been violated by his attempt. Given the likelihood of her death, Emily made the decision to either pretend to be dead or speak to him. In an attempt to defuse the situation and maintain her composure, she decided to speak with Patrice. She reiterated that she understood everything, that excessive drinking causes such things, that everything was okay, and that she would keep it a secret. Patrice asked her to please him after stopping the car. Emily declined. He then accompanied her to the back seat, proceeded to undress her, and again violated her. Emily tried to maintain her composure. She kept conversing with him, downplaying the damage he had done to her. Patrice suddenly started crying and expressed regret for his actions. "You have 10 years of my life in your hands," he told Emily. He must have been sincere, because Emily didn't think he was such a great actor. She felt hope once more. Emily soothed her tormentor and attacker. Her only concern was to survive this nightmare, so she spoke softly to him. She asked him to drive her home after she was able to calm Patrice down. When he refused, they went to Patrice's friend Eve's place. Patrice stopped touching Emily as they lay down to sleep in the same bed. A sense of expectation developed. Despite going through hell, Emily is still alive. Even though the assailant was only a few centimeters away from her, she felt a little safer because she knew Eve was in the adjacent room. For several hours, the girl was able to sleep until she heard his girlfriend Eve awaken. They were in the kitchen when Emily got up. When Eve and his girlfriend Nora noticed Emily's facial bruises, they were appalled. She told them that a guy at the concert had attacked her. His face was hidden by a hood so she couldn't see it. Emily lied, primarily to protect herself but also to protect Patrice. She had been severely shaken and was still in shock after all. She might not have been completely conscious of what was going on, as though her soul had separated from her body. This is a typical defense mechanism used by traumatized individuals. Since Eve knew that his ex-girlfriend had thrown him out following a heated argument and didn't fully trust him, she discreetly pulled her aside and inquired as to whether Patrice had anything to do with it, even though she was staying with him. Nora is adamant that it was a guy from the concert and that Patrice had nothing to do with it. Patrice went to the kitchen as well after waking up. Emily was right when he said, "Yes, it was a guy in a hood. Unfortunately, there was no chance of catching him." Anyway, Emily was taken to the hospital by Nora. The girl's neck had evidence of strangulation, according to the doctors. She also had a number of facial injuries. She would need to stay in the hospital for a few days while being monitored by doctors. Emily felt at last more secure in the hospital. She made the decision to come clean and admit that Patrice had actually attacked her. But he had already vanished because he thought Emily might confess everything. Now that one of Patrice's victims was alive, the police began looking for him. He would spend 3 months evading capture. Patrice, now known as Frank, met Marie Norman at a country festival on June 14, $1,997. Murray lived in a chalet in a small town below Foix and was 35 years old. When the young man complained about having nowhere to stay, Murray felt sorry for him and offered to let him live with her in return for some housework. In addition, Murray decided that Frank would take care of the house while she visited her parents on the 20th. For a few days, Murray and Frank lived together in this manner. He fixed things and worked in the garden during the day, and they ate dinner, chatted, and smoked together in the evening. Murray and Frank had a terrific time on June 19th. She organized a dinner to celebrate Murray's new position at a wolf sanctuary in Orlu. They smoked cannabis and drank a lot, clearly in a positive mood. Frank, that is Patrice, tried to plant a kiss on Murray. To avoid an unpleasant situation, she went into the bedroom, but it was obvious that she wasn't prepared for it. But then the man hit her against the wall, grabbed her by the head, and followed her into the room. Despite feeling lightheaded, Murray was able to escape his hold. Patrice then grabbed a chair and struck his victim, who had collapsed on the bed and was no longer conscious. He repeatedly attacked her viciously. He began choking her with his bare hands after this brought her back to consciousness. However, Murray was still breathing when he let go of her throat. Patrice then gagged her and tied her wrists and ankles. He then carried Murray's body to the first floor and started cleaning up to get rid of any remaining blood. To hide the bloodstains, he applied blue paint to the blue carpet. The top layer of blood-stained wooden furniture was removed with an angled grinder. The murderer washed his own clothes in the washing machine and set fire to sheets and clothing in the garden. He then buried Murray in her own garden after digging a hole in the garden and covering the victim's body with a blanket. He stole some valuable items that could be sold, such as the angle grinder, and 5,000 francs in cash the next evening before departing the chalet. He left the following note on the table to try to dispel suspicion. "Murray, I don't know where you are. I finished my work and am leaving." Patrice was traveling to Spain in Murray's vehicle on June 20, 1997. In addition, it was his 29th birthday. Patrice arrived in the southern Spanish city of Alicante a few days later. He met Isabel and Valerie, two French girls there. The young people soon became friends and spent days together, going for walks, eating meals, and tanning on the beach. The girls' holiday came to an end, and it was time for them to head back to Paris. They exchanged phone numbers and agreed to get together again in the future, if only they were aware. Patrice proceeded with his travels, stopping in Belgium and Germany before reaching Paris on September 1, 1997. He called Isabel and Valerie, of course, and they decided to go out to dinner that same evening. Patrice told the girls that his car and all of his money had been stolen, but they were still glad to see their new friend again. He was very good at making himself look like a victim. Before leaving, he asked one of the girls if he could spend 2 days with them. Valerie was unable to take him because she was going on a business trip the following day, but Isabel let him sleep on her sofa as long as it didn't last longer than 4 days. A loud explosion woke up the residents of the apartment building where Isabel Shuchari, then 31 years old, lived on September 4, 1997. As it happened, the girl's apartment had been the scene of a fire before the explosion. Her body was discovered on the bed, partially burned. The fire started close to the restroom after the kitchen's gas burners were turned on. Isabel's death was clearly not a coincidence. 3 glasses, a bottle of pink wine, and champagne were on the table, and the front door was left open. The killer's extreme cruelty was demonstrated by the wounds on the victim's body. Blood was dripping from her mouth, nose, and anus, and there was blood in the toilet. Isabel's body, however, showed no signs of semen. Rather, a carrot that was stained with blood was discovered close to the mattress. It would be confirmed by the autopsy that the girl was tortured by the perpetrator. In addition, she had been badly beaten. Her face was primarily struck, but other parts of her body were also hit. The cause of death was asphyxia. Because of the testimony of Emily Espy, who survived Patrice Allegre's attack at the end of February, investigators were immediately alerted to the fact that Isabel had provided shelter to a man named Patrice. This was because the police had been looking for a particular Patrice for a while. Then, Mireille Norman's relatives, who were expecting her as a guest, started to worry after she vanished. But her body wasn't discovered until 3 weeks later, when it was bound and buried in the garden. However, even though he gave a false name, many witnesses had seen his face and recognized him from the investigators' photos. So after the body was found, gendarmes' suspicions were strongly connected to Patrice. He was already being actively sought when he returned to Paris in early September. His search warrant made the rounds of France. The police reached out to his friends and family and offered a reward for helping to apprehend him. Patrice then got in touch with a friend and asked him if he could spend the night in Paris. At that point, the investigators saw a chance to capture him. They requested that this man give Patrice a call back and point him in the direction of a prime capture site in Châtenay-Malabry. At 5:10 p.m. on September 5, 1997, Patrice went inside the house where the police were already concealed. He didn't fight being arrested. He even appeared relieved to be arrested, as if he were sick of hiding, according to some witnesses. Unexpectedly, the public paid little attention to the serial killer's arrest. Since the investigators were initially unable to connect the various cases, it could be that the media failed to report that a serial killer was on the loose. However, it was also because the car accident and Princess Diana's death in Paris on August 31, 1997, took center stage in the news. Consequently, there was little media coverage of Patrice's arrest. It didn't garner much media attention. Patrice voluntarily cooperated when he was being questioned. He gave a detailed account of his crimes and admitted to them. He described them in the present tense as though reliving them, but with a totally detached expression, which made it terrifying. Patrice was taken into custody in connection with the assault on Emily Espy and the killings of Isabel Chichari and Mireille Norman. But he used a different name when Patrice mentioned Mireille Norman, the girl who let him stay in her chalet in return for helping out in the garden. The investigators wondered why he had given her the name Martine. They gradually came to understand that he was mistakenly thinking she was another of his victims. Investigators offered Patrice champagne, oysters, foie gras, and more outdoor walks in exchange for disclosing information about his other victims because they knew he had a penchant for luxuries. In fact, Patrice later admitted to the murders of Valerie Theriot, Martine Mathias, and Law Martine, only after the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together as evidence that the detectives were already aware of. As is already well known, investigators came to the conclusion that Valerie Theriot and Martin Mathias had committed suicide, but as it happened, Patrice knew each of the women personally. He was co-workers with Valerie Theriot, who was a waiter at the same Toulouse cafe. She recognized Law Martine, who lived with him in the same area of Toulouse, and got into his car. She was Patrice's neighbor, Martin Mathias. They shared apartments across from one another. To put it another way, investigators were unaware of numerous hints that suggested Patrice Allegre was a potential suspect for a long time. For a serial killer, that was unusual. Even if they were only acquainted for a few days, as was the case with Emily, Patrice knew each of his victims by name. However, his approach was always the same. We hang out, spend time together, make friends, and then the attack happens. Investigators and later psychiatrists observed that Patrice found it much more difficult to explain the murders when they discussed them, even though he readily confessed to the killings and helped the investigation during interrogations. Every time, he described the incident as follows. He attempted to kiss the victim, but she refused, so he got angry and strangled her. The man claimed that he did everything by himself, but in certain instances he assaulted the victims with objects. This suggests that his account of the killings and assaults is not accurate. Does he have a bad memory of what happened, or is it a lie? It's difficult to say, but it calls into question his confession anyhow. Let's take Martin Mathias's case as an example. Patrice remembers that in early February 1997, he met her at McDonald's. After he asked to sit at her table, they struck up a conversation and discovered that boxing was a common interest. Patrice had previously trained under French boxing champion Martin Mathias. Patrice claims that Martin invited him to join her for a drink a few days later and agreed to meet with him again, and this meeting was when everything went wrong. This version isn't entirely supported by the autopsy, though. Despite not drinking, toxicological analysis showed that she had alcohol and chloroform in her system. Additionally, the intimate area of her body bore the scars of an electric shock. As you may remember, the electrical wiring in the apartment was altered, and a light bulb was unscrewed. This raises the possibility that Patrice stalked the girl because he lived across the street, even though the girl did not invite him to her home. Then, because Martin Mathias was stronger than him in normal conditions, he rendered her incapable of moving. It is crucial to recognize that there are differences between the killer's account and the available evidence, even though there are no facts that can be used to prove this. Furthermore, this suggests that he is not making an effort to be totally truthful with the inquiry. He also talked excitedly and in detail about his early years. On June 20, Patrice was born in Toulouse. At the age of 17, his mother, Michelle, a hairdresser, became pregnant with him. Roland, his father, was a police officer and 4 years her senior. He was always an unwanted child, and Patrice knew it. The second son, a desired child, was born to Michelle and Roland 7 years later. One could not say that Patrice had a happy childhood. His father would physically abuse his mother, and his parents would frequently quarrel. When Patrice attempted to step in, he was beaten instead. Being a police officer, Roland neglected his son and was frequently away from home. In contrast, Patrice's mother didn't seem to care much for him. But when Patrice was young, she collapsed into an alcoholic coma in front of him in her beauty salon, because she was an alcoholic. She also consistently cheated on her husband and was unfaithful to him. Patrice was able to observe some of her private interactions and the post-fight reconciliations between Michelle and Roland. He would frequently try to sleep in his room by covering his head with a pillow to block out the sounds of his mother's groans coming from the room next door. Another time, when Patrice, then 6, was sitting in the back seat and watching everything, she got pleasure from one of her friends in the car. Patrice idolized his mother and hated his father in spite of everything. He would stand up for her and was offended when others made disparaging remarks about her. He had to repeat a year multiple times because he struggled to learn in school. Because his mother permitted it, he would skip classes. He started stealing, selling drugs, and committing crimes during this time. But each time he was taken into custody, his father would save him. For instance, Roland once compensated the victims of Patrice's thefts with 300,000 francs. His actions may have stemmed from a traumatic incident that happened to him when he was 13 years old. Two boys kidnapped him after he fled his home. He was abused in a car and drugged with strong illegal substances before being abandoned on the side of a distant road. For a boy who was not yet 14, this could not have failed to leave scars. This gives us a chance to learn more about him, but it doesn't excuse what he did later. He began abusing drugs and drinking excessively when he was 14 years old. The issue was that under the influence of drugs, Patrice, who was characterized as charming when sober, underwent a radical transformation. He became so genuinely aggressive that his friends, who were aware of it, were terrified of him. Patrice once became furious when someone made a negative comment about his younger brother while he was intoxicated at a bar. After leaving, he came back to the bar brandishing a weapon, held it to the victim's head, and squeezed the trigger. The gun miraculously failed to discharge, and Patrice was captured. His first and last murder might have been this one. At the age of 17, Patrice Allegre attacked a girl for the first time. Everything was going well when he first met the girl at a party. They went to a park, where the girl pushed Patrice away when he tried to approach her. It should be clear to you by now that rejections made him furious. He apologized, took the girl home, and immediately stopped choking her. But his strategy was already starting to take shape. It's interesting that Patrice never had issues with girls. Rather, the issue was that he had two sides. He was charming as long as the girl agreed, but if she didn't, he had to coerce her into giving him what he wanted. Patrice had two committed romantic relationships in his life. Cécile was the subject of the first. Their first real love story began in 1986 when Patrice was 18 years old. After 7 years of dating, the young couple had a daughter. But their relationship ended in 1989, just months after he committed his first murder. Their bond was similar to Patrice's parents. Patrice would physically assault Cécile during their heated arguments, but Patrice could control himself to some extent with Cécile. He tried to strangle her, for instance, but stopped when he said, "No, not you, not you." Cécile ended up in the hospital in 1994 with a broken jaw. After she lodged a complaint, Patrice was placed under arrest for a number of weeks. Cécile ultimately made the decision to end her relationship with Patrice in 1995. He met Sylvie the following year, and the two would live together until February 1997, when Sylvie also left Patrice because of his violent behavior. At that exact moment, Patrice attacked Émilie after moving into his friend Yves' home. On February 11, 2002, Patrice's trial got underway in Toulouse. He was charged with 5 murders, 1 attempted murder, and 6 violent crimes. Numerous errors made by the police during Valérie Thériault and Martin Mathias's investigation, which led them to conclude it was a suicide, were brought up during the trial. Given that his father was one of them, there were even rumors that the police were shielding Patrice. It was only a conspiracy theory, though. Psychiatrists examined Patrice's case, which was uncommon for criminal cases in France. His divergent views on his father and mother were among the most intriguing features. He vilified his father while exalting his mother. He even told his mother that they ought to murder his father when he was 13 years old. In spite of this, Patrice's father, Roland Allegre, showed up in court, took the witness stand, and looked his son in the eyes while declaring his love for him, in spite of everything he had done. He compared his crimes to those of his father, and Patrice's response was, "Well, I don't love you, I hate you. I should have killed you, as I told Mom. Then I wouldn't have caused so much harm." But he never once put the blame for anything on his mother. Psychiatrists think that the trauma from his mother's private adventures had a big impact on him. As a child, he was terrified by his mother's groans, but as an adult, he developed into a powerful man who tormented women by stifling their groans. The very essence of these women. It's interesting to note that he never attacked while his victims were unconscious. Émilie, who was fortunate enough to wake up and speak to him, was the first victim to calm him down and persuade him not to kill her. Émilie regained her human face when she woke up, but it seemed as though he could render girls unconscious and do whatever he wanted with them. He himself stated, "I have a memory lapse. I remember choking her, then she came to and I apologized. It brought me to my senses. I'm ashamed of what I did. I don't know what to say." It's also intriguing why, despite the apparent attraction between the young people, girls abruptly turned him down. The psychologist believes that he unintentionally caused the women to reject him. As is typical of killers who have personally experienced violence as children, he desired control over the victim. It was his strange method of taking charge of the circumstance again. Given that he violated each and every one of his victims, it would appear that the motive is simple to determine. It's not that easy, though. He acknowledged that he did not enjoy the attacks, despite the fact that this explanation seems the most obvious. For someone who occasionally has normal relationships and at other times commits horrible murders, he is more than just a sexual maniac. According to a U.S. psychiatrist who examined him, it was far more important to have control over the situation. Essentially, rather than humiliation leading to violence, violence led to humiliation. He was never able to explain why he killed. He spoke enthusiastically with psychiatrists during the trial, hoping they would answer this question for him. Another crucial query was whether Patrice had any additional victims, particularly during the period between 1990 and 1997. That is quite possible, because some of his known victims were not properly investigated. Even though Patrice says he didn't kill anyone else, is he reliable? At first, he only admitted to one violent act and 2 murders. To find out if he might be accountable for any other unsolved crimes, the police assembled a team of experts. They were able to get a clue from Patrice regarding the unresolved murder case of Lynn Gabaldi by promising her champagne and oysters, along with another walk. After looking into 191 unresolved cases since 1984, they were able to locate 2 witnesses who had previously worked as prostitutes in Lynn Gabaldi's case: Crystal Berg, also known to the public as Patricia, and Florencia Caliafi, who was known to the media as Fanny. They all accused Patrice of killing Lynn, but in addition to him, they also accused Marc Barrage, the Toulouse prosecutor, of committing crimes. He allegedly hosted sadomasochistic parties where judges and politicians would have a good time. According to Fanny, the girls were abused, tortured, and occasionally killed because they did not voluntarily attend the parties. The orgies prostitutes were supplied by Lynn Gabaldi. Marc Barrage ordered Patrice to kill her because she threatened to tell the police everything. The name of Dominique Baudis was mentioned once. He was the former mayor of Toulouse and is said to have been with Barrage when Lynn was murdered. As the tension around his case increased, Patrice wrote a letter to a popular program claiming that Barrage and Baudis were in fact a part of a criminal organization. Fanny was interviewed by the same show 2 weeks later, during which she described the children she witnessed shackled in a torture chamber on the ground floor of a home close to Toulouse. However, Patrice withdrew his confession to the murder of Lynn Gabaldi only 15 days later. Later, it came to light that Patrice and Fanny had received generous compensation from the show's producers for their stories. It also turned out that Marc Barrage didn't even know Patrice, and Dominique Baudis couldn't have been at Lynn's murder because he was in Paris. Patrice and Fanny were accused of giving false testimony, and the politicians were exonerated of the charges. For providing false testimony, Fanny and Patrice received sentences of 18 months and 3 years in prison, respectively. In July 2005, Patrice Allegre was given a life sentence on February 21, 2002, with the possibility of release after 22 years. He has already completed the required 22 years of service and is currently 54 years old. He started dating a Canadian psychologist during this period who relocated to France and lived near her prison-dwelling beloved. Patrice must want to see the woman and his daughter when they are not incarcerated. He applied for early release, but he dropped the plan after psychiatrists concluded that he has not been rehabilitated and that he has a very high risk of relapsing despite his best efforts. 9 years after the attack in 2006, Emily, the only survivor of Patrice's assault who testified against her attacker in court, died. Regretfully, she decided to do this herself. That concludes the terrifying tale for today. Please remember to like and subscribe if you liked this video so you don't miss any future uploads. Tell me in the comments what surprised you the most about this story as well. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Despite the busy city streets and crowded malls, Lois Pearson always favored the quiet solitude of her childhood home, a modest wooden house tucked away among verdant hills. Lois rarely left her ancestral home, where her family had resided since her birth in 1949. Leasing her land to a man who used it to graze his cattle allowed her to live on a meager income. Lois became more dependent on her own resources following the death of her mother. She chose to use water from a well instead of running water when her pipes froze a few years ago. She carried a single lamp from room to room on a long cord for her everyday activities. Lois went to church every Sunday, and once a month went to Mineral Wells, the closest town, to do her laundry at a self-service laundromat and buy groceries. She always felt more at ease around animals and in the outdoors, frequently going for days at a time without speaking to anyone. Lois never had a romantic partner. Not even a doctor had ever seen her undressed in front of a man. In 2001, Lois met Jeffrey Maxwell soon after he purchased land west of her property in Weatherford, Texas. Lois was a little over 50 at the time, and Maxwell was just under 50. Sometimes they spoke to each other, and he would wave to her when he went by her house. Maxwell once asked her to join him for lunch. Lois was taken aback by the invitation and politely declined, as she always does. Another time, he arrived at her house, hopped out of his car, and abruptly requested a kiss. In particular, the expectant smirk on his face offended Lois. She insisted that he never return to her home. He moved away in 2005, but to her utter amazement, they reconnected just before he left. They had a quick, unhurried conversation. He came by to say goodbye and to show her photos of a modular house he was constructing in Corsicana. Lois had no idea that she would see Jeffrey Maxwell again after this farewell visit. Lois was getting ready for her usual grocery run in the afternoon of March 1, 2011. A silver Chevy Trailblazer pulled up behind her, 1970 Nova, as she was about to leave. He would have missed her if he had come 5 minutes later. Maxwell grinned and gave Lois a warm greeting. He got out of his car and started talking to her about the church. He moved slowly toward her as she responded, and she began to move away. They soon found themselves in the rear of her house. Lois tried to nudge Maxwell back toward the driveway, feeling a little ashamed of the well water containers nearby. She saw an odd change in his expression all of a sudden. It was so obvious that they both fell silent. Maxwell pulled a strange-looking container out of his coat pocket and held it up to Lois's face. He tried to hit both of her eyes with a stream of pepper spray before she could say anything, but the spray did not work. Lois sprinted in the direction of the barbed wire fence close to her vehicle. When he caught up to her, Lois had just made it to the fence and placed her hands on the top wire. He caught her and pulled her to her feet, but she clung to the wire despite the spikes digging into her fingers and the blood dripping from her hands. He was able to throw her to the ground in front of his SUV, though, because he was too strong. Lois tried to scream as loudly as she could, but nobody was around and her house was remote. Maxwell picked Lois up once more, placed her in what appeared to be handcuffs, and opened his car's rear door. He shoved her into the car and she fought to get out. He took her mother's wooden rolling pin off the kitchen table and hit Lois in the left side of the head. He struck her more forcefully on the right side when she failed to fall. The blow knocked her to the ground this time. Almost immediately, Lois's eyelids began to swell, but she persisted in trying to get away until he reached for a big kitchen knife. Silently, she sat down and felt the lightheadedness and blood. Maxwell inquired about her duct tape storage. She said nothing. He asked again, but received no answer. Then he tied Lois to the door handle of the living room and sliced the cord of her lamp into pieces. He went to his car outside. For a few seconds he was gone, but she was able to free her wrists, which had always been rather thin. She leaped to her feet and sprinted out the door. Even with ankle cuffs on, Lois had already run a few hundred yards down the road when he got back to the house, realized she was gone, and got into his car. Maxwell followed, stopping directly in front of her and obstructing her way. With a gun in his hand, he exited the vehicle. He stated, "Now we're moving on to Plan B," with a chilly look on his face. He pushed her inside his car after opening the rear door and refastened her handcuffs. He then covered her mouth with a tiny piece of duct tape. He smiled and said, "Are you a virgin?" She began to cry at that point. He slammed the door and got behind the wheel after laughing at her tears. He told her he would have to return and set her house on fire as he drove off. Lois heard the vehicle enter the freeway. She considered trying to raise her feet in the hopes that oncoming cars would see her handcuffs and assist her, but she felt completely powerless when she realized the car had tinted windows and that other drivers wouldn't be able to see her. She thought about using a tire iron to strike Maxwell, but she knew it would only make him more angry. She also considered rolling out onto the road and opening the back door, but she was unable to locate the handle. Maxwell listened to her prayer and assured her that she would no longer believe in God once he was done with her. The vehicle went off course. Lois was not familiar with the terrain. The kidnapper took her into a house's garage and shut the door after her. Cluttered with various objects, including patio furniture, a lawnmower, a lot of tools, a washing machine, and a dryer in the corner, she looked around the room. Maxwell took her handcuffs off. He started taking off all of Lois's clothing, cutting off her bra with a knife. Then he fastened her hands to the ends of a steel pole that was chained from the ceiling. She watched without understanding what was going on as he flipped a switch on the yellow control panel that was connected to the ceiling by a cable at the same location as the chains. She felt her shoulders suddenly rise, followed by her arms. As she climbed higher and higher, the ceiling motor hummed. Lois felt her bare legs hanging futilely in midair as Maxwell flipped the switch once more, causing the motor to go silent. Jeffrey Maxwell was renowned for his ability to get out of any predicament, be it shooting cattle to prevent them from being fed, burning down his own home to get insurance money, or something much darker. In the early 1980s, Maxwell corresponded with Martha Martinez, who was from Mexico. After many years of correspondence, Jeffrey finally went to Mexico and asked her to marry him. Because he deftly exploited her fears and lack of confidence, her family didn't like him at first. The 29-year-old woman felt that this was her opportunity to marry and have a child, despite her family's entreaties not to do so. She married Maxwell, had a son, and moved to Watauga, a Fort Worth, Texas suburb, with him. Maxwell had 3 children. When Rita, his girlfriend, became pregnant at the age of 18, he married her. However, they separated in 1,979 days following the birth of their second child. Martha managed to conceal her husband's actions from her family, but she was unable to conceal from her friends the bruises that appeared to be from shackles on her arms and legs. However, this paled in comparison to the horror Martha would later encounter. A deputy sheriff from Ardmore, Oklahoma, called the Watauga, Texas police station on Sunday, April 19, 1987. They had discovered a woman on the road early that morning, he reported. A deep wound on her neck had caused her to lose a lot of blood after being severely beaten. Martha Maxwell was the woman. When the police arrived at the family's house, they asked Maxwell when he had last seen his wife. He said he hadn't seen her since the previous evening and was shocked to learn that Martha was hurt but still alive. Thankfully, medical professionals were able to save her life. When she regained consciousness, she described the argument she had with her husband. She dozed off on the couch after he beat her, only to awaken bound with duct tape. Following more mistreatment, Maxwell made her drink a substance that instantly put her to sleep. In the hospital, she awoke. Martha initially assisted the police, but she abruptly stopped speaking with investigators after her husband was arrested and charged with kidnapping. Since a search of the house and car turned up no evidence, the police were unable to charge Maxwell with anything without her testimony. Once more, Jeffrey Maxwell slipped through the gaps. Martha traveled to Mexico with her son. Her husband, however, was not going to let her go so readily. Playing on her Catholic background, he pounded her with letters, even accusing her of the incident. Martha was living with Jeffrey again a month after the charges against him were dropped, despite her family's entreaties for her to stay away. The family's life appeared to be returning to normal. They purchased a new home, and Martha started college. However, it was only the quiet before the storm. She, or allegedly from her, sent letters to 2 family members on May 10, 1992. In her letter, Martha stated that she would not be communicating with her son or husband for some time. Her relatives didn't think Martha was the sender of the letters. First of all, she typically just gave them a call. Second, she would have written a letter in Spanish rather than English if she had. Maxwell hung up the phone after Martha's brother informed him that Martha had left. In order to report his sister missing, he had to travel to Texas. Since she would never have left without money, documents, a car, and most importantly her cherished son, he was certain that she was dead and that her husband was to blame. But the hunt for Martha was unsuccessful. When police questioned him years later about whether he had done anything that could have caused his wife Martha's death, Maxwell said, "Not intentionally." Jeffrey filed for divorce a few years after she vanished. He remarried Rita, his first wife, as soon as the divorce was finalized, and she moved in with him along with her 3 daughters from her second marriage. The girls soon started griping about their stepfather's advances at school, and Rita's best friend disclosed that Maxwell had beaten her 2 days prior to their wedding. But Rita didn't take the kids, leave the state, change her name, and flee, until the police came to the family's house after her youngest daughter complained about her stepfather's actions. Maxwell started shouting at Lois as he lifted her into the air. The fact that she had ignored him in the car still infuriated him. After sensing his hands on her, the woman felt something sharp and hard, like a plastic bullet. It was really painful, and it felt like he was attempting to hurt her with this vibrating object. Maxwell began striking Lois with rods of various sizes, after declaring that they would be together for 2 weeks. He hit her all over, including the painful spot on her chest. All Lois could do was scream in pain. She was barely able to stand when he finally lowered her to the ground. After guiding her to the restroom, Maxwell gave her instructions to wash up. She first noticed that she was covered in bruises. Because she was afraid of losing her eye, her right eyelid was so swollen that she could hardly see. After a hasty shower, the kidnapper himself handed her his jeans. They smelled like Maxwell and were too big for Lois. It was awful, but she knew that if she didn't agitate him over insignificant things, she would live longer. He shut off the lights, laid down next to her, and chained her ankles to the bed that night. Maxwell barely slept, and Lois had trouble shutting her eyes. Even in the dark, she could see his round, owl-like eyes every time she turned to face him. It was the first night she had spent away from home in more than 40 years. On the morning of the second day, Maxwell informed Lois that he had to purchase additional padlocks from the store. He took her to the garage and showed her a wooden box that he had made himself. The wood smelled and looked brand new. He gave her a choice between the box and a torture device. She made up her mind right away that she would stop at nothing to avoid getting on that machine. As a gag, Maxwell put a metal ring in her mouth and fastened it with a strap. Then he put Lois in shackles and handcuffs and told her to lie in the box. She inquired as to whether she would have enough air through the gag. With the lid slightly open, Maxwell positioned a wrench on the box's edge and walked away. After hearing the sound of his car's engine, Lois waited for a few seconds before attempting to exit the box. However, despite her best efforts, she was only able to push the key away and lock herself in total darkness. She didn't realize Maxwell had moved the box beneath a heavy workbench until he came back. When they got home, the kidnapper took Lois to the bedroom and took off her clothes. Lois didn't know what he was doing, and she felt uneasy because her parents had never talked to her about private matters. He asked her if she wanted to go to the garage and hang upside down after she let out a painful scream. Then she made an effort to be silent. After he was done, he once more chained her legs to the bed. She was so tired that night that she was able to sleep. Maxwell had to pay a bill for his son's repair in Dallas early in the morning. As usual, he chained her and placed a gag in her mouth. In the distance, Lois could hear motorboats, motorcycles, and cars. The gag prevented anyone from hearing her screams or calls for assistance. Lois didn't realize Maxwell had broken her front teeth until he came back and took the metal ring out of her mouth. However, she lost something far more significant that day. Maxwell let her watch the news after they displayed a picture of her driver's license on the TV. Lois Pearson was listed as missing after learning that the home where she had grown up and shared many memories was gone. They were trying to find her. The days that followed were all the same. He met his needs with her in the mornings and then left her alone. He made sure she was chained to the bed for a few days, even when he hurried to the mailbox or take a shower. But the kidnapper grew less cautious over time. She discovered one day that he had left his cell phone in the restroom. She considered taking it and calling the police. but she was hesitant because she had never used a cell phone before and was worried about making a mistake. She was afraid that he would use that torture device once more, in addition to losing faith in her. Lois dropped that notion, but she continued to think about a way out, or at least a way to change the balance of power. And after being held captive for a week, she figured out how to resist his persistent advances. She remembered what her parents had said when he lay next to her on the 7th day and pressed his mouth to hers. They had informed her that her oral cavity allegedly contained an agent that caused bronchitis. She never kissed boys when she was younger for this reason, among others. It's difficult to tell what actually happened at the time, but Maxwell woke up the following day with a fever and chills after she let him touch her lips, calling the move a battle of microbes. He could hardly move from his bed and was pale. He never tried to take advantage of her again. He insisted that she write him a check for $500 on the morning of the 8th day. He told her to date it February 2nd, which was more than a month earlier, and explained that groceries cost money. She had already prepared to go shopping in town with the $60 he had taken from her wallet, but she didn't protest, figuring the money would buy her a few more days. The date was March 12, 2011, and when Sergeant Ricky Montgomery and 4 other police officers pulled up to a small home on the shores of a lake in Corsicana, 80 kilometers south of Dallas, it was getting close to 6 o'clock in the evening. They were there to ask the homeowner some questions regarding the missing 62-year-old woman. Search teams started searching the area after her house burned down and her remains were not discovered. After several days, the police concluded that Lois Pearson would not be found alive, despite the use of helicopters equipped with thermal imaging for the search. They brought in pumps to empty 2 ponds and used search dogs trained to locate bodies, but the woman was nowhere to be seen. Then, $500 was taken out of her account 8 days after the fire. The check was dated a few weeks earlier and was made out to Jeffrey Maxwell. Officers traveled more than 160 kilometers to question Maxwell after learning that he also owned a blue SUV that matched the description of the car a neighbor had seen the day of the fire. A judge then issued a search warrant for the vehicle. On Sunday, March 12th, the 12th day of Lois's captivity under Maxwell, everything went according to plan. Maxwell watched television while Lois prayed on the floor. The abductor jumped up and hurriedly led Lois to a far-off room, telling her to keep quiet when they both heard a knock at the door. They heard another more insistent knock before he could put a gag on her or handcuff her. The man rushed toward the exit. Although Lois could hear voices outside, she was unable to understand what they were saying. After escaping the room, she noticed the word sheriff on a car parked by the road through the window. She was shocked when fear first paralyzed her whole body, but she quickly realized it was her opportunity and took off running. Jeffrey Maxwell stepped out of the house and shut the door firmly behind him. His house was in a terrible mess, he said with an apologetic tone while grinning at the policeman. According to Sergeant Ricky Montgomery, they were interrogating anyone who knew Ms. Lois Pearson or had recently visited the area around her home. In response, Maxwell said that although Lois was his neighbor, he hadn't seen her in a while. He also mentioned that Lois owed him money, which is why she sent him a check. When the door swung wide open, Montgomery was still asking Maxwell if he would be willing to come to the sheriff's office. An older woman's feeble voice reached them. With her face bruised and her hair disheveled and tangled, the woman looked weak and stooped. She moved quickly past Maxwell and went up to the cops. Montgomery didn't recognize the missing woman, but he did have a picture of her. He said, "Who are you?" "It's her, Lois Pearson," cried one of the officers behind Montgomery before she could respond, and everyone in the room was momentarily stunned. The police officers collected themselves and put Maxwell in handcuffs. The woman initially claimed to the officers that Maxwell had been her friend and had not harmed her. Her only memory of her rescue is the fear for her life, even though she later learned about the concept of Stockholm Syndrome. Lois told the officers that Maxwell had abducted her, beaten her, and done things to her that she didn't want when he was removed a few minutes later. When she mentioned the machine, the officers were initially perplexed, but as soon as they searched the house, they discovered the machine she had described, along with a yellow control device that was covered in blood. In addition, they discovered 4 different-sized adult toys, a lot of adhesive tape, whips, handcuffs, and weapons all over the house. Blood was found on several articles of clothing in the house, on the floor in front of the car, and on the bedding. Additionally, a large collection of adult films was found by the police. After being questioned for 3 days, Maxwell admitted to almost everything. February 14, 2012 marked the start of the trial. Maxwell shaved his beard and shed more than 60 pounds in the months between his arrest and the trial. He was a lanky, ghostly figure now, wearing a suit that didn't fit him well. Maxwell was found guilty on all 3 counts by the jury in less than an hour. The jurors heard from Rita's friend, whom Maxwell had beaten 2 days prior to their wedding, despite the judge's ban on discussing his wife Martha's disappearance during the trial. Additionally, Rita's daughters testified about how their stepfather's advances affected them. Lois gave a court testimony as well. Although she had always been reticent to speak in front of others, she now spoke forcefully about the ordeal she had gone through during those 12 days of imprisonment. She recalled the 3 cats that had died in the fire, Bluey, Blackie, and an unnamed kitten, and detailed the wounds that still plagued her a year later. Above all, she believed that she would be rewarded in heaven if she remained innocent all her life. Once more, the defendant was given 3 consecutive life sentences by the jury in less than an hour. Maxwell would be eligible for parole no earlier than 119 years following the verdict, as the judge decided that he would not serve the sentences concurrently. A deputy sheriff led Maxwell out of the courtroom while shackling his ankles and handcuffing his wrists in front of the audience. After the trial, Lois told reporters that she wanted her story to be known so that everyone could hear how her faith had carried her through difficult times. Even though victims of such crimes typically don't want their names mentioned in the media, she occasionally questions why he picked her. Maybe Maxwell knew she would be the ideal victim if she vanished from home for a few days and no one would notice. Someone might have gone looking for her if he hadn't messed up and put her to sleep. She might have been noticed missing by someone. Lois had memories of her previous life after spending 12 days with Jeffrey Maxwell. Her home and the car she cherished were not the only things he took away. He took her mother's sheet music and her piano. She doesn't have a picture of her father anymore, and she doesn't even know if there is one. To purchase a small trailer for her, her church raised more than $17,000. Although it's not the house she grew up in, the trailer is warm and comfortable, and the old house was always cold in the winter and full of pests. She now has a phone, and the church even gave her a new piano. Lois Pearson loves spending time with her new friends, but she still prefers the peace and quiet of nature. She admits, "Before this, I never knew how much I loved people." And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.